Happy Saturday, everyone. Welcome to the What is Truth podcast. I am joined by my lovely friends from the Apollo Detectives. I'm joined by Scott, Mr. Rob, Mr. Ben, Emlyn, and Gerard White. And we are expecting the legendary Marcus Allen, who should be joining us here shortly. How are you, gentlemen?
Well, we're doing great over on this end here. How are you?
Doing
I'm okay,
great.
thanks,
Doing great.
Easy.
Yeah, we've got a full panel today. And so start sending those questions, everyone. We should have a lively little crowd tonight. And if your answer does, or if your question doesn't get answered immediately, just keep putting it in and then we'll get you in. And at some point, I will put the StreamYard in the description. So if you are a NASA apologist and you think we are spewing poo-poo, you are more than welcome to call in and challenge any of our guests' findings or make whatever assertion that you wish, and we will break it down accordingly, brutally, honestly. I will guarantee you that. And and we have another member of the Apollo Detectives, Mr. Randy Walsh,
Randy.
has just joined us.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
How are you, Randy?
I'm good. Hi, Wheezy. How are you?
Doing good. Long time no see. So we got to get together and do another show.
Looking
very
forward
soon.
to it. Yeah,
Yes,
for
sir.
sure.
Awesome. Yeah, so everyone, please put in your questions and we will address them. And as we get ready for some questions, I suppose we can start off by talking some moon landing stuff. I listened to a couple of debates on the moon landing, and I'd like to get your opinion on all you gentlemen, see what you guys think. So this is my own personal thoughts or question. When engaging with people that believe in the moon, the moon landing myth, as I call it, I feel we do ourselves a disservice by saying that it is our job to debunk the NASA moon landings. I don't feel that's how the onus should put it upon ourselves. It is NASA that has claimed that man made it to the moon with 1960s era's tech. It's not us. We simply don't accept their evidence. The telemetry data has been deleted. The original tapes have been lost or deleted. So their evidence is flimsy at best. And so I feel, this is my personal thought, I feel we need to start taking a stronger stand regarding that. Look, it is you guys to present the evidence that man made it to the moon. What are your thoughts on that?
This would be the burden of proof element, which skeptics and believers in, the skeptic. When I say skeptic, I mean the NASA crowd who believe this sort of thing, who among the skeptic community, they say that there's a burden of proof, which means that you don't have to prove anything unless you're making a specific positive claim. And if you're making a negative, they would describe it as a negative claim, and therefore no proof is required. But that's actually a fallacy, because it comes to the definition of positive and negative claims. And as you just described it, Wheezy, so who is actually the one saying this is true? We're essentially just questioning.
And I would like to add to that as well. And I say I've looked at all the quote proofs that NASA and their defenders have put out there, and I found in my evaluation of the evidence, there isn't anything that can either be falsified. Every time somebody was trying to make the Apollo missions work, I would find there was always be something else to either contradict the evidence or at least provide a alternative explanation that didn't require manned flights to the moon. Like the laser reflectors thing, first of all, they were bouncing lasers off the moon before the Apollo missions. And then, of course, there was the Russians, which, landed 2 unmanned lunar rovers on the moon, which deployed reflectors of their own. Then you get into the topic of radio communications. Well, the Soviets initially demonstrated how to dupe the radio signal such that people on the ground would be fooled. We had the Zond 5 around the moon, which initially was thought to be manned because it was rebroadcasting cosmonaut voices. The cosmonauts were are safe and sound in Ukraine. Oh, I stand with Ukraine and Gaza. The cosmonauts there are safe and sound in Ukraine, in the Crimean Astrophysical Observatory. I think it was the command center that was there. Right, they had command center in Ukraine. And they were basically broadcasting the voices to the Zon 5 as it was circling around the moon, and the people on the receiving end, they initially thought it was manned. Okay, and then we get to the subject of the rock sets, a whole different field entirely and stuff. We look into that and we find so much counter evidence. Just this is supposed to be the number one proof of the moon missions, and we have things like ferric iron in the rocks, which can only happen if you expose it to air and water for a long time, which doesn't occur on the moon. And even one of the samples was proven to be from Earth. What gave it away was the fact that it had felsic composition, and they said, "Oh, it was an Earth meteorite." Earth meteorite, yeah, right. And what else was there? Oh, yeah, and then we got the samples from the Chinese, which turned out to be very chemically different to the Apollo samples.
Awesome. Anyone else have any further thoughts on the burden of proof?
Sure. I don't disagree actually with anything that's been said so far. I take a little bit of a more 40,000 view of this, and the onus, in my opinion, the onus is on the proponents of the missions to prove that we're wrong, not the other way around. Given the fact that we have seen a systematic erosion of evidence that NASA says existed over the last 50 years. So you've got, Jared mentioned the rocks. You've got rocks that have disappeared. You've got, and as far as I'm concerned, anything can be duplicated in a lab anyway. So I don't buy into the mineral components of the moon rocks. To me, that doesn't prove that you went to the moon. That just proves that we already know that unmanned missions have brought back very minute samples of the moon's surface, but also the telemetry tapes that have gone missing, all that valuable information, 140,000 reels of telemetry tapes. I have never heard a reasonable explanation for that disappearance. And I've looked into this, I've researched it thoroughly. And to say that there's a tape shortage, it's just the lamest excuse I've ever heard. That we're talking about the most historic achievement of the 20th century. Why would you tape over the most historic data for that achievement because you're running low on tape? I mean, it just doesn't carry water. So the onus is on the proponents of the Apollo missions to prove that we're wrong, not the other way around. That's not how this works.
Yeah, something I'd like to add too is that we were having a look at some of these rocks that they were, apparently brought back from the lunar surface. One of them is called Big Mully. And, like most lunar rocks, it contains trace amounts of radioactivity due to exposure to cosmic rays and the natural radioactive elements found in the lunar material. But its radiation levels are very low and not hazardous to humans. But I really find that strange because the Earth has a protective layer. We have the Van Allen belts, whereas the moon doesn't. And that goes the same for Mars and some of the other planets. One of those things is unique to Earth in many ways. And I would find that it's impossible to me that you would find trace elements that would be exactly the same between the lunar surface and what is found on Earth and Antarctica. So again, very strange to me. And again, I also say that the onus is on the ones who are claiming that there is no radiation and that they are exactly the same. That's what I would have to say.
Yeah, perfect. So for those people that are probably on the fence still and are just tuning in and just barely finding out more about the moon landing missions, let me read a little piece from Apollo 11 missing tapes on Wikipedia. I mean, you can search this yourself. The Apollo 11 missing tapes were those that were recorded from Apollo 11 slow scan television SSTV, telecast in its raw format on telemetry data tape at the time of the first moon landing in 1969 and subsequently lost. The data tapes were used to record all transmitted data, video as well as telemetry for backup. So most of us that have been in this rabbit hole for a while, we already knew this. That was just simply for the people that are just dipping their toes and wanting to show that there is what we talk about, you can verify yourself. I mean, don't ever take anyone's word for it. Definitely verify it yourself. But from time to time, I like to put these articles and read them for the audience so that we're backing up what we're talking about. So someone had a question here. I don't know. Let me go back to it here. How do they know how much vacuum there is in space? Who wants to take a stab at that?
Good question.
Yeah, it's well, clearly it's to do with I suppose Jara probably know about this, but it's to do with the level of
well, you would
atmosphere
send
around
up
the Earth.
well, first of all, the higher you go up into the atmosphere, the less dense the atmosphere becomes, and so you would start measuring it as you go up, and presumably you'd do the same thing on space missions. I noticed somebody else had a question about what was it? Question about the Blue Ghost lander. Is anyone following the Blue? This is from Tinker Terrible. Is anybody following the Blue Ghost lander? Yet again, won't fly anywhere near the Apollo landing sites. The photos, videos look incredible. Well, obviously it's not going to land there because NASA declared the places to be no-fly zones.
Do they have the authority to do that? Because this is not a part of the United States. This is not even a part of our planet. It's on another planet. There's no territorial claims that have been made so far on any other worlds that I'm aware of. In a legal sense, it's like going back to the 16th century when there was like exploring and Christopher Columbus and Captain Cook and people like that. I don't think they have the authority to prevent people landing anywhere on the moon and investigating if they wish. They can request that you don't go near the Apollo landing sites, and they have done. And they actually put up a statement saying that these are major historical landmarks or moon marks. They don't think that about the tapes, as we've just been explaining, and throwing away the tapes and saying, well, it doesn't matter is a bit like throwing away the Mona Lisa and saying, well, we got plenty of posters and mouse mats and things like that. We don't need the original canvas anymore, do we? That Leonardo actually painted and things like that. But they don't. If they want to keep people away and they're so desperate and they're clearly making an assertion which they can't be backed up by international law, interplanetary law, then obviously they're getting, that's an act of desperation in a sense. They're bluffing. They're making a legal bluff.
Well, it's either that or they might try to enforce it. I was just going to say it's either that or they might try to enforce it with military action. Shoot down any probes that's taking off. That would be an extreme sense, of course. But with the Americans, they seem to think they're above the law now.
Could be the Space Force has actually said they want to control cislunar space. That is the space that's above Earth orbit and between the Earth and the Moon. And maybe that's why, Jarrah.
Okay, Corky Cat had a question as well. So do we think NASA will be the subject of Doge review? And if so, what impact could you see? Well, I have no doubt in my mind that if Elon Musk has been an opponent of the SLS system for years. He's been trying to advocate his own Starship rocket, which has been demonstrated it can't even reach orbit. It can barely do suborbit right now. But, with him at the helm, any contracts that go to his competitors, down the toilet. So don't be surprised if that becomes the reason they cancel the Artemis 2.
I think Scott had something to say, and he hasn't said much. Scott, you sent a link over. I'm going to share screen it. What did you want to say about this? Scott, you're muted. You're muted. Scott, you're muted. If you can hear me. Scott. Scott. If you can hear me, Scott, you're muted.
Okay, now I got it. Okay.
Yep.
There, I just put that in the chat there. and you can actually buy a piece of the moon. Unfortunately, my internet connection, given the fact that we've got incredible number of solar flares this week, have basically screwed up the internet connection here. Doesn't matter if I test it, it tests really well, but then it just garbles out. Even your audio, the video goes as well. So I'm just going to have to sit back and catch as much of the conversation as I can.
No problem, Scott. We got you. Okay, someone made a question. How much heavier was Apollo 17 LEM compared to Apollo 11 LEM? And that was by Gul Goey. Shout out to you.
Is he talking? Maybe that person can qualify that question a little bit. Is he talking on launch or on reentry?
Copy that. If you heard that, Gul Goey, if you can submit your question again and clarify that.
The reason why I say that is because officially, each Apollo mission brought back X amount of pounds of moon rock. So it was like 50 pounds for some one mission and like 120 pounds for another mission. So, but on launch, the F1 engines had to be, there had to be a very specific weight, given the fact that, you're looking at about 45 to 46 tons just on the lunar module, the service module, the command module, service module, and lunar module together. So you needed that thrust, that amount of thrust to lift it from the F1 engines to lift it off the launch pad. So if you can qualify his statement, I appreciate that.
Well, I think I can answer his question precisely. On the earlier missions, the lunar module at launch, they weighed 15,200 kilos, and on the last three missions, it was 16,400 kilos. That's at launch, and so that's a difference of 1,200 kilograms. And the dry mass, we say the dry mass, we got the, when it's launch mass, we're referring to it when it's got the fuel inside, and when it's a dry mass, that's when the tanks are empty. Okay, so for the first missions, it was, dry mass was 4,280 kilos, and for the extended, the last three missions, it was 4,920 kilos.
So I got a follow-up question to that. Is that, so let's just go with full fuel, full propellant. And in terms of we factor in the weight of the actual hardware that was used to transport the astronauts there to the moon, land on the moon, and so on. So are we talking extra weight? Are we now talking extra power that needed to be produced from the F1 engines at the first stage of the Saturn V? Because I think that has to be clarified.
Well, I think you would have somewhat more fuel on the rocket, or you would distribute the masses accordingly. The extra mass, obviously, from the lunar module and the later flights. Obviously, you've got the lunar rover there, and you've got different scientific experiments. Of course, it's going to change the weight factor, change the mass factor.
So I agree with that. I'm just wondering, because I haven't read anything in the narrative, that would there be anything in terms of required extra power from the F1 engines? Because we know each engine produced 1.5 million pounds of thrust. So that's a total of 7.5 million pounds. So would there have been a requirement to produce more thrust in order for that added weight? Because also we have the moon buggy and Apollos 15, 16, and 17, right? So I don't know. I'm just putting that out there.
I don't think it'd be significantly different, because it's only a difference in the lunar module. It's only a difference of about 1,200 kilos. If you needed extra thing, you would probably have to reorganize the weight between the two craft accordingly and stuff. But as I said,
so organizing the weight. No, I get that. So organizing the weight is good, and I understand that. You're talking in terms of weight and balance while you're within the forces of the Earth's atmosphere. I get that. I'm just like, I know, because from what I've read, and for all the people watching this right now, maybe you might have another follow-up question to that, is NASA said they had to be very specific in terms of their weight, pound for pound, because of the thrust that was needed to launch from the launch pad. I mean, we were also talking that they were getting down to very specific details, like they had to come up with specific material that would keep the weight down. I think the cost was something like, in today's value, $20,000 per pound. So that's why I'm putting that out there. I mean, I don't know. I've been away from the details in this for quite a while. But I don't recall reading any specific thrust vector for thrust lift power for any increase in volume. I mean, common sense tells me if they're going to increase the weight of the Saturn V rocket, they're going to need a little more power to get her off the launch pad. That's where I'm going with this.
Well,
anyway,
they did take a few things off the later missions. They took a few things, like they, I think on the last flight, they didn't even have the Westinghouse camera on the lunar module. They just relied on the lunar rover's camera. They took a few things off and they added a few things here and there and stuff. I haven't looked at the itinerary in quite a while, but I have to take a look at that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we wait for a friend to come back and see if he's got a follow-up question. But I just thought that was an interesting discussion.
Yeah, great.
Can I mention something about the link Scott just sent me? Just quickly, Scott, the link that Scott has just sent looks to me like some kind of scam. There was a bit of a scandal in this country, in my country, the UK, a while ago, because a company had set up saying that people could write in and have stars named after them, but they would charge £85, and there was no connection to the International Astronomical Union, which names celestial bodies. And £85 seems a bit steep when you consider that stars are not exactly in short supply. In fact, everyone in the world could have several galaxies named after them, and there'd still be plenty left. So this, to me, Scott, looks like something similar. I don't think it's serious, but I certainly wouldn't send them any money or try buying a part of the Mare Imbrium.
I think there's a guy by the name of Dennis Hope who who claims he owns the moon and sells sections of real estate on the lunar surface. Oh, you want this piece? Yeah, I'll sell it to you.
So we just covered a more technical question, and it was awesome that you guys were having a little back and forth, Jera and Randy. I like to mix it up with beginner questions and more advanced questions, and again, because the more advanced is for the people that's been in it for a while, but there's some people that are just starting their journey into this, and some of these conversations may be hard to follow. So I want to, if we can talk a little bit about this, because again, for us, it's very well known, but maybe for people just dipping their toes, they may have never even heard about this. But it's regarding the stolen and missing moon rocks. And again, if you don't believe me, don't take my word for it. Just Wikipedia it and you will find it. Stolen and missing moon rocks from Wikipedia. Of the 270 Apollo 11 moon rocks and the Apollo 17 moon rocks that were given to the nations of the world by the Nixon administration, approximately 180 are unaccounted for. Many of these rocks that are accounted for have been locked away in storage for decades. The location of the rocks has been tracked by researchers and hobbyists because of their rarity and the difficulty of obtaining more. And if you go on to read this Wikipedia on it, the slant, at least for me, seems to be, it doesn't seem like they're even focusing on the very fact that out of 270, 180 of those rocks are nowhere to be found. That is a big deal. In this Wikipedia article is like, they've got to be stashed away, and some have been. They do go on and on about. If you read the Wikipedia, they go on and on about the fake moon rocks. I don't care about the fake ones. What happened to the allegedly real ones? That's what I care about. But they don't really focus on it. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I would like to just make a clarification on this here. When they're talking about those 270 rocks, they're talking about the samples that were basically given as gifts. During their goodwill tour, the astronauts, they gave samples of rock to various world leaders, and obviously, when they were given to those world leaders, they were no longer considered government property, no longer considered U.S. government property. And some of those other samples that have gone missing. Some of the countries were careless with the gifts they were given. Some of them still have them, some don't. But I think the bigger question to be looking at is the samples that are still considered under NASA watch. They keep all those samples that they give away to scientists under lock and key. And there have been cases of samples getting lost in the mail. Like if you want to analyze a rock, you basically have to write up a peer-reviewed proposal. Basically, okay, here's what I want to do. Here's what I want to study these rocks. Here's what I hope to learn. Yada yada yada. You send it off to NASA. They say either yes or no. If they say yes, they send you the rocks. You got to send them back, of course, unless your research will actually destroy them in the process. Like mass spectrometers, there's stuff like that. That actually destroys the sample to get the data from it. You release all this energy in the destruction of it, and that can tell you what it's made of. But there have been cases of samples that have been stolen. In fact, I recall one incident in which a bunch of interns, they basically used their passes, they got past security, and literally drove out with an entire van full of the samples.
Anyone else have some thoughts on that?
Donald Trump, I'm sure that's not the real one. He mentioned the famous case of the petrified wood.
Yes.
Now this was touted as a real moon rock for a long time, and the explanation of how that mistake was made has never been satisfactory.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and Wheezy, I think I just want to say earlier, I think you raised a very good point. We need to, I think it's better if we take a 40,000-foot view of this instead of getting into admiring ourselves in details, because when we mire ourselves in details and we get into, the minutia of it, we're going to lose people, because people, especially who are new to this, and it's not that we're any smarter than anybody else. It's just that we've looked into this a long time. So we tend to get caught up in the details. So I just wanted to say, I think that's a very valid point on your part. Regarding the moon rocks, I'm not surprised that they're disappearing, because the more rocks that disappear, the less NASA has to produce evidence that they went to the moon, right? So it kind of seems very a common sense approach from NASA's point of view. All right. So I'm not like we've seen the disappearance of schematics, designs. Millions of documents have gone missing from all of the hardware used in the Apollo missions. You won't find a complete document set anywhere. Even historians, which I quoted in one of my books, said that he's been down to Florida in the Space Museum. He's looked at the microfilm, and there's gaps, major gaps in that film. So I'm not surprised that we're seeing disappearances of moon rocks. In fact, if I was running NASA, I'd make sure all of them damn well disappear, because then you don't have to produce evidence, right? So, and they leave it up to us to argue amongst ourselves or whether they're real or not. And that's without getting into the details of when, what mineral content it has, so on and so forth, right? You just need to take that 40,000-foot view, use your common sense. The evidence is disappearing. It's disappearing year after year, decade after decade. That's got to tell you something right there.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I brought up the whole thing about the missing moon rocks is, I went earlier about the missing telemetry data, the missing original tapes. Now these rocks, out of, what was it, 270, 180 are missing. So this is why I'm taking these little pieces, and the NASA claim starts falling apart, and it's for the people. Again, I'm with you, Randy. This is the side we need to take. If we start getting into the little tiny details that can be interpreted this way or that way, you lose a lot of people. They're not going to follow along. So why give NASA the edge on that? They're the ones that made the claim. They're the ones that have to be able to defend their claims, and it falls apart pretty quick.
And I just wanted to make a follow up to. I was just wanting to make a follow-up to what Ben had said about the Dutch moon rock. In fact, somebody asked me in the comments about that. The rock that was at the Rijksmuseum, if I believe it was called. Basically, they claimed it was that was mistaken identity. They thought it was mistakenly thought it was one of the gift samples that they gave. That's why I think the better rock sample to bring up as evidence for a hoax is the rock sample that basically turned out to be an Earth meteorite. I think that was Which sample was that? I think it was Big Bertha. Big Bertha. That was the largest sample from Apollo 14. Sample number 14321. It was basically found to have a section of it which was felsican composition. It which doesn't happen on the moon. You know, the felsic rocks, those are your igneous rocks that form from the melting and resolidification of sedimentary rocks. You know, you don't get sedimentary rocks on the moon because, you know, there's no atmosphere, there's no geological activity or anything like that. So, you know, you're not going to get felsic rocks on the moon. And so they think, okay, yeah, this is definitely from Earth. It must be that they said, oh, it must be an Earth meteorite. So I think that's so I think that's the better rock to be pointing to as evidence of a hoax, because this one is documented. It has an official NASA number. They can't just say, oh, it's a mistaken identity. No, this is one of your official rocks, and it's from Earth. You admit it's from Earth.
Isn't that bad luck? That's terrible bad luck. You go all the way to the moon, and of all the billions of rocks you could pick up, you happen to, you know, 1 in a billion happens to be an Earth meteorite. I mean, you know, really, Lady Luck's not shining there. I mean, it is extremely implausible. I mean, it's possible, physically possible, but so unlikely that Jarrah, we shouldn't take it. We shouldn't take any explanations seriously.
I would like to comment on that too, because when I did my geology course, I never forget this. We had a lecture about meteorites from other planets. He said we got rocks from the moon, we got rocks from Mars, we even got one rock from Mercury, but there's no rock from Venus. Why do we think we have no rocks from Venus? It's because the gravity of Venus. Venus, for example, is literally almost the same size as the Earth. You know, so it's literally going to have similar gravity. You know, if it takes a rocket to get from Earth to Venus, it's going to take a rocket to get from Venus to Earth. You know, so the idea that, and plus it's ridiculous that they're going to get a rock sample thrown to the Earth. The atmosphere, some people say, oh well, maybe it's because the atmosphere of Venus is much more strong. Well, the pressures you get from meteorite impacts is greatly outweighs the pressures that you get from Venus's atmospheric pressure. And some people say, oh well, it's closer to the sun. Well, so is Mercury. Mercury's even closer to the sun than Venus. Okay, and we got at least one rock from there. So obviously that can't be the reason for it. You know, find me a meteorite from Venus, then we'll talk. And I think yeah.
Good points. I want to introduce Dr. Raza.
Randy, sorry, you had something to say. We were both talking at the same time.
I think you have a little delay, Jarrah. It's a couple of seconds delay. That's what I just said.
Randy, did you have something you wanted to say?
Well, I can say that after you introduce, make your introduction there, Weezy.
Hey, Dr. Raza, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
There you go. Welcome to the stream, my man.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I wanted to bring him in because he's been here for a few minutes just hanging out. So I wanted to make sure we hadn't forgot him. How you been?
Yeah, it's good. Regarding what can we offer as evidence of a hoax, I don't personally think that making a moon rocks argument is any kind of a strong argument. I think the smoking guns are when we can find flaws in the Apollo images and Apollo video clips. This is absolute proofs of a hoax, and other stuff talking about rocks is just confusing people, actually.
Fair enough.
Marcus is the expert there. We need Marcus.
Sorry, Ben.
I was going to say we need Marcus. Where is he? Come on, Marcus, join us.
Well, what I would like to do, if it's possible, is with Scott, if we could go over some of those images that were in the children's books. Wasn't it your granddaughter brought this to your house?
Oh, yes. Do you have them handy there to share?
Yeah, I can bring those. I can bring them up.
While you're getting those books, perhaps, Randy, would you like to say what you were going to say? I think we've interrupted you a few times now. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, that's okay. And there's 6 of us on here, so I understand that. Thanks. I think just to sort of bring it back to the evidence in general, in terms of the Apollo missions, the so-called evidence. One of the things that I've talked about, I've written about too, is that NASA had the resources to compile all of this information from all of the hardware used, all of the so-called moon rocks, all of the film, photographic evidence, you name it, all of it. It should have been compiled and put into literally one building called the Apollo Space Museum. And I don't know why that was never done. And it's not something that's talked about a lot. I mean, there you go with NASA's lack of common sense again, right? Is that all of this evidence, you look for this evidence that's scattered all over the place. You go, you know, to find evidence of, well, who built the lunar module? Grumman Corporation. So you got to go to Grumman Corporation, and they've got like holes in their documents. I mean, they've got missing documents. You go to North America and they got the same thing. All of this information should have been gathered and literally put under one roof, literally guarded for posterity. I mean, that's what you do with man's greatest achievement. That wasn't done. And that wasn't done. Immediately after the Apollo missions, they started systematically destroying evidence. Like we went back to, if I can just briefly go back to the telemetry tapes. Those tapes did not go missing in the 1980s. They didn't go missing in the 1970s. They were actually signed out by NASA in the 1970s. They didn't follow proper procedure. And from that point, after NASA signed them out, they disappeared. And I say disappeared in parentheses because we know they didn't disappear. They were destroyed. And they were destroyed because there was nothing on those tapes. And if historians had gotten a hold of that information and found out that there was zero information and zero data on those tapes, that would have been proof positive the Apollo missions were faked.
Amen to that.
There's a lot of talk now about going to Mars, for goodness sake. I mean, Donald Trump even mentioned it in his inaugural speech. I mean, we know that Kennedy brought up the challenge to land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth in the State of the Union address in 1961. This was like literally on his inaugural speech, and he says presumably he means he's got to do it within 4 years, because Trump can only be president for another 4 years, because no one could be president in the United States for more than 8 years, and he's had 4 already. But he's got this flamboyant character, Elon Musk, but is this? It's all really nonsensical when you consider all the things we're talking about now, and how Mars, every single problem to do with getting to the moon is magnified 100 times when it would ever come to a mission to Mars, which would be have a human crew.
Yeah.
So it's pie in the sky.
I
just wanted to comment on this question on screen here. The evidence of forgery with the Hasselblad crosshairs, clearly manipulated photos. And they like to claim that, the originals, they weren't blocked in the original pictures. Well, I have the earliest release of the Sea Rock photograph, and some people have wrote in to comment, hey, the crosshair is blocked on that one too. So there we go. Find me releases earlier than that, and then we'll talk. I got the earliest release, so good luck with that.
So let's see. I think Scott and Robert wanted to talk about the latest video.
Yeah, I have them open here, but just for some reason they don't want to show.
You can't present it? Let me try.
Yeah, what you need to do is go to the present in the middle of the little tab there.
Yeah.
It'll say present. And then put your window up. There you go. It just came up right here. I don't think you want to show that yet. Let me know when it's ready.
Yeah, the problem is that I can't open these, though. You see, I'm clicking on them and I'm opening them. They're opening here, but they won't open inside of
So what you need to do, like I said, once it's opened, you need to so back out of that and start all over. Go to present, and it'll ask if you want to show a window or a file. And
I'm just trying to share the screen here.
Yeah.
While you guys are doing that, I'd like
it just came up right now.
There we are.
Did it? Well, you've got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on the screen right now.
Okay. So in any case, we will look at this. It says to the moon. Now, Scott, do you want to take it, because this was on your granddaughter's books, and I think
flip it to the title page. It's the second shot that I did. So we'll start with the cover.
And for people getting this on audio only later on, we are seeing a little, what would you call it? A poster, a flyer of the planetaries.
It's a page from a children's book, right?
it's a page. There. This is the children's book here, The Moon. It's by DK Books. You can see it online and discover it. They're children's books, educational books that they produce and whatever. And this particular book is on the moon. And then if you go back to the other page on it there, you'll see at the bottom on that particular page, it says the moon is around 238,900 miles, or 384,500 kilometers, right? Or 30 Earth diameters away, right? Which is all nice to give children that. And then it said the astronauts took 3 days traveling at 2,000 miles an hour. Well, 3 days at 2,000 miles an hour, right? So you go 72 hours.
Well, that's simplified math. Of course, there was no common
But this
speed.
this is an educational book.
Yeah, they're simplifying it for children, of course.
Well,
You
that's
can understand as well, the initial speed is that translunar injection, and as you drift closer towards the moon, you get you enter the moon.
Exactly. That's not my point. The point is the math is just that poor.
It wasn't meant to be, yeah.
But it is meant to be. These are educational books. Basic mathematics should be there. Right?
Right.
These people have PhDs that write these books.
Who wrote the book?
Yeah, maybe could you mention the title of the book? You talked about it, but for the people who were only listening to the stuff, we didn't get the title. Here we go. It's The Moon, Discover the Mysteries of Earth's Closest Neighbor.
If you go to dkbooks.com, you'll find all of their books.
It says by DK. I don't know if DK is the publisher.
DK is the
publisher.
Yeah.
And when you go to their website, you will see all of the authors of these books.
I used to read books like this when I was a kid.
The full title is The Moon, Discover the Mysteries of Earth's Closest Neighbor. So
you see, the other thing I have a problem with is this, because in the comment section, there was a fella in there, and he was saying that we were wrong in every one of our videos because we were saying that it was 6,000 miles an hour to orbit the moon. So this is what Apollo was orbiting the moon at. When you go into some other like ChatGPT, it will say, no, it's 3,200 miles per hour. But that is one orbit we're talking about here. It's going to take, you have to be going, it's 1 hour. It takes you 1 hour at 6,000 miles per hour. If you're going any slower than that, you're going to fall to the surface. The moon's gravity is going to pull you right back down again. So the problem with ChatGPT and some of these other programs is they don't tell you that. They don't give you the time factor. We're talking 1 hour, not 2 hours.
Yeah, they're not that intelligent, really, are they? And they're not going to take over the world anytime soon.
No.
In fact, you can even program them not to say certain things. Apparently, some of them have had like pokes put into them to prevent them talking about certain things.
Yeah, but you can program them to have a political opinion too, so I wouldn't take it too seriously.
No, but when Wikipedia puts this up and ChatGPT puts this up, and you get people coming in the comment sections and saying you're wrong about certain things that we've known for years, they're in NASA's own documents. That's where we got them from.
Yes,
but
it's all well documented. That's the problem. And now it can be any speed, any time. It doesn't matter, especially if you're on ChatGPT. It'll just make it up for whatever. If you say it's wrong, it'll just change it one more time again.
Yes, and what about this angry astronaut? Or what was this fella? There was another fella there, the everyday astronaut, I believe it was, just put a new video up, right?
A 2-hour and 20-minute video.
I saw some of that. I stopped watching it after he got to the bit about the sea rock. He was pushing the same debunked claims about, it's just a hair on a later edition negative. Well, I got the original. In fact, let me post the link in the private chat. Okay, where is it?
Yeah, put that up.
Yep. Let's put this up. Here we go. Where is this? Here we go. It's in the chat. Should be in the chat now.
Yep.
There we go.
Hey Rob,
Right,
can
this
you
is
close
the-
down those windows, your share screen that you have, please?
Okay. Yeah, we'll do.
All right, and then I'm gonna pull up Mr. White's link, and I'll share that. 1 second here. Okay, it's up.
Okay. Okay, scroll down to the very bottom. Towards the bottom, I'll tell you when to go. You'll find the... And then I keep scrolling down, further down, all to the way to the bottom. Okay.
If someone,
Here we go. That's the picture. Yeah. Enlarge it.
I can hear someone's like dryer in the background. If we can mute
No, that's
that.
probably my ceiling fan. Sorry. Hang
Oh,
on.
okay.
I'll turn it down to a lower setting. There we go. Okay, that's the photograph, and you can see that the picture is dated May 1st, 1972. This is literally the date these pictures were released. Okay, and you can see that the sea on the rock is there. If you enlarge it where it says click to enlarge, you can zoom in. It's in the caption. There we go. Yeah.
Jared, can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
My question is this: isn't that the argument that the apologists try to make? Is that this scan you're looking at here was the one that the hair got in it?
Well,
And
this
then
is
later
I
when
doubt
they
that
scan
because
it-
this is the way they were released. You see, what they actually have a section in the appendix explaining how they were released. You see, what they in fact here's the statement. This is a statement from John W. Holland. He says, from the original film, duplicates were produced and the original film secured. We tried not to use the original film unless special requirements were needed. From the masters, screening prints were made for Public Affairs Office to view and select views for news releases. Duplicate negatives were made and used for printing. For example, 8x10 color glossy pictures or larger, color transparency, slides, etc. All the original film that went to the moon was brought to Building 8 at the JSC, that's the Johnson Space Flight Center, and processed, duplicated, and printed. And it's important to note that at this facility, the conditions were ultra clean. You know, there was no possibility that a hair could have possibly got on this negative during this duplication process, right?
Okay,
and
Jared,
furthermore,
I have a question. Can you see, Jared, now on the rock, you see where the sea is?
yes.
No, yeah, go straight down on an angle to your right at the bottom, and it looks like there's a ring. There's another object that's attached to the bottom of that rock, and yet nobody complained about that.
You mean the crease on the bottom of it?
Yeah, it looks like there's a ring, like a little nose ring or something there.
Yeah, Renee, he brought that up. He reckons that was he reckons this was a paper mache rock, and what you're seeing there is a crease. They would have prop rocks, you know, like at in Hollywood when they had tours and whatnot, they would like throw paper mache rocks up at the things during like landslide effects and whatnot. You know, but obviously they're not going to hurt anybody and everything like that. But the reason he reckons there's a C on the rock there is because like they when they marking the positions, all the different props, they would put okay, here's prop A, prop C, prop B. And here's maybe 1 to 10 or whatever. Basically, the stagehands we mark the set, and they bring out the props, and here's the C prop, here's the C on the card. Okay, I put the C down here. But in Hollywood, they're smart enough to actually keep the labels hidden, right? And if you look just below the C, you can see there's another C in the dirt there. That's probably the marking there, and for whatever it looks like, they've accidentally left the C on both the ground and the C on the rock itself showing. Getting back to the point about
so your point being also that it couldn't, if it was the excuse was just one hair that fell on the scanner, it couldn't have been 2 hairs, right?
Exactly.
Identical C's, right? Yeah.
And here's the thing as well. You see, this particular release has been tracked to. I've tracked this to NASA headquarters. I've tracked this to Johnson Space Flight Center. There's been many different places releasing this thing, right? So for this claim to it, just a hair on the negative, then if that was the case, that would imply that contaminated negative was transferred back and forth between all these different facilities, making prints of this picture. I must emphasize these pictures at the Johnson Space Flight Center, they were processed under ultra clean lab conditions. In fact, they would not only they would decontaminate the negatives before developing them, they would actually keep them in a freezer, so they would remain the right temperature, and they would put that freezer in another freezer. That was the excessive nature of these clean rooms that they were processing the pictures in. So there's not a snowflake's chance in hell that a hair could have gotten into this duplication process, into this printing process or anything like that. Okay, and so if they're going to be, and they must emphasize as well, they produced about 100 or so duplicates of the masters, which where they were distributed out to the different companies who contractors who made things for them on Apollo. They gave stuff to different agents, so different organizations within NASA. They transferred internally this way. Okay, so if you're going to be claiming that it's just a hair on the negative, that would have to imply that this one contaminated negative was transferred back and forth between all these different facilities who have known to release pictures of this sea rock. So that which they talk about Occam's razor. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, right? What's more logical, right? That that the sea was there originally, or that they've transferred this sea between all these different facilities, making prints of the picture, and not once during transit did the hair, change positions or fall or whatever. Occam's razor stays the hair.
It's another skeptic fallacy. It's another skeptic fallacy because then. Sorry,
no, but you know something though that I thought interesting now, Raza. Remember you sent me this, and I put it at the end of one of the videos, I believe, a few weeks ago. And this is interesting what Deep Seek is saying about these moon landings. Now, do you want to read that, or should I read it? I have it right up here on the screen.
If you don't mind, I just wanted to say one thing last about this hair issue, because when I first heard the theory that the moon landings were a hoax was 2001, and the first thing I did was I went to the NASA webpage, and at that time, the sea was not on the rock, so that was 2001. So that means that the hair had been removed sometime between when the original images came out and when I first saw the NASA webpage in 2001. There was no more sea there. So damage control had already been done before that. So I just
as I show in my article, I was just going to say, as I show in my article, there is the earliest picture without the sea on the rock was published in Aviation Week and Space Technology, which was in May 8, 1972, which is literally a week after this picture was first released. So obviously NASA, they thought, oh crap, there's a sea on the rock, we got to get rid of that. Right? But because the way these pictures were distributed, they already made 100 or so duplicates of these pictures, so they couldn't, get them all recalled and deleted in a timely manner. So obviously pictures, uncensored pictures, continue to find their way, into magazines and books and whatnot, and even on their website.
Now, this is, and Dr. Raza shared this with me as well. So this is the question that we are seeing on the screen. I'm going to read it for the audio listeners. There are many flaws and inconsistencies in the photographic and video evidence for the NASA's Apollo missions, suggesting that the so-called moon landings might not have been real. And DeepSeek's answer to that was the moon landings, in quotation marks, might not have been as straightforward as they claimed. However, it is important to approach such claims critically and examine the evidence thoroughly. Here are some common points raised by skeptics, along with explanations that address these concerns. Interesting answer.
Yeah. So the thing is this. This is China's method of what they call Wei Wu Wei, which means action through inaction, which means blowing the whistle without blowing the whistle. So that's Chinese philosophy. They've been doing this for a long time. And one example of this is on the recent Chang'e mission, Chang'e 5, when they launched it, the announcer somebody from the Chinese space mission was saying that he was skeptical of the lunar orbit rendezvous, which Apollo claimed to have taken place, on the Apollo missions. He said I'm skeptical about that. But then later on in the mission, later on in the news interview, he says, "Oh, I'm good friends with Buzz Aldrin, one of the guy who was one of the first guys on the moon." So it's like that this way of doing that is we'll say it was a hoax and then later on say it wasn't a hoax. So this is their way of action through inaction. Okay, so regarding this Buzz, so the thing is this, Buzz Aldrin came to China recently, not so recently, but I think his around 2016 is when Buzz came to China. And not only Buzz, but also this woman who was the first Soviet astronaut in space, right? So this woman, I'm forgetting her name, but anyway, the first woman in space, supposedly. Now, the thing is this, I did an interview with an ex-Soviet whistleblower, and he said that this woman did not go to space either. Russia was also pulling off their own hoaxes, and one of them was the supposed first woman in space. So now you've got it, Jera? Jera's got it?
Russia's space hoax by Lloyd Malin. I think this is what you're talking about. And the woman's name was Valentina Terestrova. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yeah. So this, according to this Russian ex-Soviet whistleblower who I interviewed, he said that woman did not go to space at all, and the videos you're seeing of her supposedly, in the rocket on the way to space are fake. So now the thing is this: both Buzz Aldrin and this woman came to China back in 2016, around 2016. I might be forgetting the date. I can look it up later. But they came to China and then they had a meeting and they said, we're both going to blow the whistle. Both Buzz and this ex-Soviet astronaut. She's also going to admit that she never went to space. There were several fakeries going on in the Soviet missions as well.
Hey, this is the link that you sent me, and I am at the last paragraph.
Yeah,
Did you want me
this
to read
is
it?
in the Chinese. Just wanted to follow up to something that Raza said about the Chang'e 5 mission. Now, this is a Chinese article. It's called "The First Results from the Chang'e 5 Soil Research Have Been Released," which are very different from the samples donated by Apollo in the United States. In the final paragraph, it reads, in addition, the original plan for the Chang'e 5 lunar sampling was to take 2 kilograms of lunar soil, but in fact only 1,731 grams were taken. The reason may be the density of the lunar soil was wrongly calculated. The basis for this calculation was the density of the density of the lunar soil is the 1 gram of lunar soil donated by the United States. They're talking about that basically they took the gift display that the United States donated, and they basically took that sample and basically used that to calculate what the surface was going to be like. And they did that, and they used this in their cross comparisons with the samples that they took. They say the United States may have concealed key data. Therefore, although we do not doubt the authenticity of the U.S. moon landing, it is more doubtful whether the samples it sent as gifts, especially the 1 gram of lunar soil it sent to China, really came from the moon. So they're blowing the whistle on the Apollo rocks, but they're not blowing the whistle on the mission. Like, oh, we don't dispute that the missions went to the moon, but we dispute that the rocks came from the moon. What would be the point of distributing false moon rocks if they actually had gone there? Did you lose them on the way back or something?
It's interesting they even made that point. They say, look, it's almost like they anticipate what people are thinking. And I have conversations like this with people all the time. I'm not lying, Ben. They say, I'm not lying, because they know I'm thinking they might be lying. So they said, well, we're not doubting the missions were real. We know you're all asking us that because it's very obvious that this is evidence that if they're giving out fake data in terms of physical evidence, then that is a reason to doubt them. So yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
it also same thing with the Chang'e 2 images, right? So when the China released these Chang'e 2 images of the so-called Apollo landing sites, they just released one image that had like a white dot there, and they said this was the landing craft, right? You can't see any footprints, you can't see anything like that. You just see a white dot. So they did that on purpose. When China released this Chang'e 2 image, then it was saying that we saw something at the Apollo landing site, but not saying what they saw. Yeah.
this is an important point because it needs to be reiterated, because one of the most common responses I always get is, well, America's not the only country that can go into space now. There was, even back then, there was another country that could, and now there's a dozen countries with space programs. So that you're telling me they're all keeping this secret? And of course, the answer is a simple yes.
Right. There's also an important thing which I need to mention here, because at the time of the Apollo missions, China had been given the tracking technology. But the tracking technology which China had at the time, the US also had the ability to jam that technology. So this is an important point, because many of the NASA trolls will try to say that if the moon landings were a hoax, China knew about it at the time and they could have blown the whistle back then. But that's simply not true. America had the ability to jam China's tracking equipment. So China did not learn about the moon landings being a hoax until much later. China did not learn about the moon landing hoax until 1982, when they joined the UN Space Committee. So, the theory that if China was keeping a secret back in 1969 is wrong. China thought it was real in 1969. It wasn't until 1982 that they actually learned that it was a hoax, and they agreed to keep the secret in exchange for technical, transfer of the technical. China wants to learn how to go to the moon for real, so that's the agreement. If you just let us copy. If you can go for real, if you can really send a man to the moon, then just let us copy that technology. So this is the point, when I say that China makes a date like, oh, we'll be on the moon by 2030. China has made this statement. We'll have a man on the moon by 2030. But what that statement means is that we'll have a man on the moon by 4 years after Artemis 3. Because when they made that statement, the date for Artemis 3 was 2026. And so when NASA says 2026 and China says 2030, that means 4 years after Artemis 3. So it's all based on just China's copying NASA technology.
So I want to, since I like to mix it up with advanced and beginner stuff, this is for the beginners, the amateurs, and I still consider myself somewhat of an amateur. 100%. I don't feel like I know a lot like the gentleman that I'm joined with on this panel, but this is a good one when dealing with NASA apologists. One of their common retorts will be, well, if the the landings were fake, the Russians would have said something. And anytime I hear that, this is what comes to mind. And this is from IFL Science. I effing love science is what that stands for. A quote unquote authentic, legitimate website, if you will. Title is Ex-Russian Space Chief Claims NASA's Moon Landings Were Fake. Dmitry Rogozin, former head of Roscosmos and master troll, is up to his usual tricks. So this is what I would call as moving the goalposts. But let's read on. The ever provocative politician took to the Telegram to claim he asked for official proof of the NASA moon landings in 1969 when he was deputy prime minister of Russia. But he apparently only received a copy of a book by cosmonaut Alexei Leonov. When President Vladimir Putin handed him the top position at Roscosmos in 2018, he asked again and was accused of undermining the sacred cooperation with NASA. I also received one angry call from a high-ranking official accusing me of aggravating the international situation with my doubts, he said. So you can read that article. But if you read this article, it's clearly a pro-NASA slant on this article. And this is what I call as moving the goalposts. So these people will say the Russians would have said something. So we have an example of a Russian actually saying something. Oh, no, but this guy is a troll. Ignore him. That is called moving the goalpost. Any thoughts, gentlemen?
This it's interesting because it's important to understand this through realizing that the space race was as much about publicity, politics, and public relations as it was about technology. There are many reasons why the Soviets may have considered an American landing on the moon to be an advantage to them. Certainly, in terms of they had various deals going in terms of exports and imports. They also, as we were describing, their own secrets. The Soviet space program have its own secrets, its own fake material, and also. The Soviets were a long way. I mean, the first decade of the space race, they had a decisive lead, and a close race is more interesting than a race that's going to be won easily. So, in terms of justifying budgets and things like that, so maybe it was in their interests for America to catch up and make it like a bit more exciting as a spectator sport for the people. So there are all kinds of reasons why there was international cooperation, as there is today. There was international cooperation on many secrets around the world, not just to do with space, but other secrets as well. So, yeah, I mean, again, that's something Marcus knows a lot about, and he's not here. But I hope he joins us soon.
He joins us. Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, actually, go ahead, Jared.
I just wanted to comment on one of the things that somebody here has written in the chat here. I'm probably butchering this pronunciation here. Normak Oktik. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. You say Apollo always claimed humans breathing low pressure O2, but don't like to offer proof. Well, I can offer some proof that the Apollo capsule was low pressure. Right? Apollo 1. There's this passage here in this book here. It writes here at 6:13:17 or 14 seconds after the fire had been detected, the cabin pressure reached a pressure level of 29 pounds per square inch and the cabin ruptured. Okay, what they would do on the pad, they would basically pump up the pressure above atmospheric pressure to simulate the conditions in space. And so the atmospheric pressure is about 14.7 psi. You take that away from 29 psi and you get 14.3. Yeah, that indicates that the Apollo capsule cannot withstand an internal pressure of 14.3 psi. Okay, and so obviously, you'd have to, when you're in space, you would have to have the cabin at low pressure so that the thing doesn't rupture. In fact, the Soviets were the ones who were flying with a sea level pressure, right? That's debatable, of course, because there's some evidence of fakery in the earlier missions. But even from Soyuz onward, right, there would always be the sea level pressure because the walls on the capsule were much thicker than the Apollo spacecraft. They were much more sturdy to withstand a sea level nitrogen oxygen atmosphere.
But you know what, Jared? This is what we get all the time in the comments section, and I think it's good, but and this really hasn't been answered yet to the subscriber satisfaction and way mine as well. So I'll just put it this way. The Apollo astronauts were breathing pure oxygen to a point, right? Like they would get so high, like they would get to the altitude and then it would start to bleed off, I believe, the pressure.
That's correct.
Okay,
during the launch, they would have it pressurized to.
Okay, yeah, that's right. Okay. But here's the thing. How can those guys breathe 3.4% pure oxygen? And how can they breathe 3.4 pounds PSI of pure oxygen? it's still look at people that go up to the hikers that go up to Mount Everest. They don't have pressurized oxygen. Like, they have a mask and the oxygen's being forced. It's being, when they push the button on the front, then it's forcing it in. But they don't have a pressure suit on, and they cannot stay there indefinitely. They can't stay there. For example, if they were to stay there more than 6 hours up on the top without a pressure suit on, they're going to get sick very quickly. So the question is how are the astronauts doing this?
Well, first of all, if you're going up on Everest, obviously you're in open air, I guess. Well, obviously it's less air, I should say, but it's open. Whereas in space, you got a sealed cabin and everything. That's what's keeping the pressure, and that's what you're using to breathe. But in preparations, actually, Renee was brought up something.
But it's the low pressure. That's what people don't understand. It's the low pressure.
Yeah, I'm getting to that.
Okay.
Getting to that. Basically, if I recall correctly, I can't remember the exact numbers at the top of my head. I think it was about 3 psi to 7 psi, which was found to be the safe limits for breathing pure oxygen. Okay, and anything outside those limits would be considered to be damaging to humans if you were under it for too long. Okay, and so in space, in launching, what you would do is you would have the cabin pumped up to about a few pounds above atmospheric pressure. And as you said, during liftoff, you would vent that out slowly, and you'd basically pump up the pressure with pure oxygen before you would actually even get in your suit. Because if you recall, during the launch, they would actually don the spacesuits, and so before you actually get into the spacesuits, you would do the same thing you would do as if you were going to go scuba diving. You would want to get the nitrogen out of your system, so you would breathe pure oxygen for a little bit. Then they would put you in the pressure suit. Then they would get into the spacecraft and launch as soon as possible, essentially.
In terms of margin of error, I mean, that's quite dodgy, because if you get that wrong, all kinds of things can happen. I mean, it's not just, it might not just kill you instantly, but even a minor error in terms of like oxygen content in the mixture could cause you to suffer hallucinations and things like that. The way mountaineers do, the way pilots used to before they had pressurized aircraft, things like that.
Yeah, I've read somewhere that there are different tests with different air mixtures and stuff. Sometimes they would have a mix of oxygen and helium, which obviously can't do much good for your voice. And sometimes there was, I forget the actual numbers, but they did a whole bunch of tests with different breathing materials, and that's how it went in the long run.
But 3.4 psi of oxygen, and they're breathing this the entire time. Going back to the Mount Everest, 6 hours with that oxygen tank, and they're getting hypoxic, and that's with oxygen because it's not being forced into their body.
Well, in the spacesuit, you would have it forced into your body because you're basically in a sealed pressure system.
Right. But you're only at 3.4 psi.
Well, like I said, you can't fill up the spacesuit to. Same with the capsule, you can't fill up the spacesuit to a sea level pressure, otherwise you'll burst it.
Okay.
So how did they not get hypoxic?
It's outside my area of expertise. I just
posted an article about the negative health effects of pure oxygen.
I mean,
I wanted to one second, guys. I want to give an update. People were worried about Mr. Marcus Allen. I did get an email. It appears he was struggling to, unfortunately, log on to the StreamYard. I'm going to see if I can get him on. He may be asleep. It's super late in the UK, so that is the latest. So he is good. He's had a hard time. Yeah, he's okay. So I wanted to make everyone aware because people were getting concerned, as I was, and we all love him and cherish him.
Okay.
Before we get to that,
just to answer Robert's question, I just looked this up. Hypoxia occurs at 60 milligrams of Hg, which in psi that's about 1.2 psi. So that's well below what they use in the spacesuits.
Can I ask if there's has there ever been any instance of astronauts on the Apollo missions experiencing or reporting hypoxic symptoms? For example, even very experienced mountaineers like George Mallory, for example, he knew his business very, very well. But even he had episodes where he would like imagine there was another man climbing with him when he was on a solo climb. Things like that. Has that ever happened in anywhere in the Apollo record? Even a minor
We have no
hallucination.
such records.
Even a minor hallucination. That's what, it could be just a little one. Yeah.
Sweet. I want to give a shout out to, we have 130, 140 people watching live. So good little audience tonight. Shout out to everyone that made it. Shout out to everyone that's putting in questions. Thank you guys. We appreciate it. And we try to touch on everyone's questions. Randy, we haven't heard from you in a minute. What thoughts have gone through your mind? Have you seen any questions that you wanted to address specifically? You're muted, Randy.
Good?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I wouldn't say in terms of any questions specifically, I just want to see, I'm taking that 40,000 foot view again, and I'm listening to the conversation, the discussion's really good, but again, we tend to get a little mired in the details, and when we get mired in the details, we tend to lose the viewer's attention. And again, that's not a slight on the viewers, because I know if I'm new to a subject, I'm not picking up the details because I don't know about it, because they haven't studied it, right? So that has nothing to do with intelligence. That's just that it's not their area of expertise. They haven't looked into it. But there's a few points that I want to make. I just want to go back to what we were talking before in terms of, well, if the Apollo moon missions were a hoax, the Russians would have known about it. Well, we know today, and I'm sure most on here would agree with this. We know today, I know that some of us have done some work on this. I'm now doing some work on this, not necessarily as it relates to the Apollo missions, but overall in my other research, which I'll be publishing, that governments are a lot more interconnected than we knew 20, 30 years ago. And the average person is now only beginning to realize. When you factor in how interconnected the governments are, there's evidence that during the Apollo missions, and this is all on David Percy's and Mary Bennett's website, allis.com, that there was some behind the scenes going on with the Apollo missions. They may have actually been working a lot more closely than we knew with the Russian Space Agency. So when people come out and say, well, the Russians would have known, if the Russians had known it, they would have said it. That's just not, that doesn't hold water either. And the reason is because if they're working behind the scenes, and we saw this with Apollo 13, and Marcus Allen has spoken very well about this, that there had been a lot of back channel talks going on between the Russian Space Agency and the American Space Agency that involved Apollo 13. And Marcus has talked about the 2 Apollo 13 space capsules, and the one exactly that was captured by the Russians. And the question is, how did they get that space capsule? And again, Marcus has gone through this. I'm not going to go through it here. But when I hear people say, well, the Russians would have known about it, well, number one, we know now that these governments are a lot more interconnected. After the Soviet Union fell 30 years ago, communism fell, a lot of these Russian officials and academics came over to work for American institutions. That's got to tell you something right there. And number two, when people say they want the Russians would have spoken about it, well, in fact they had, and they've been speaking about it for the last 30 or 40 years. The problem is that people do not validate anybody or any academic outside of our own borders, right? So when a Russian scientist comes along and says that the Apollo moon missions were fake, again, which you'll find on the allis.com website, and which I've documented myself, they're not validated because the argument is, well, if they had credentials and they were validated, they would have gotten our articles in any peer-reviewed scientific magazine. Well, we know that that's not going to happen either, because the scientific magazines are in part paid for and funded by corporations and or government institutions. So you're not going to get any truth from them as either. But so then they say, well, we'll wait for a politician to come out. And that's exactly what we just saw. We saw a Russian politician come out and say the same thing. Well, he's not really, we don't take him seriously. So I think it comes back to one really important point. And the point is that governments, all of them, including China, Russia, India, all of the governments are all a lot more interconnected than people realize. And that is the fundamental factor. When people start realizing that, you'll see how it's all connected, how all of it, the Apollo moon missions, the major conspiracies, the 60s, the JFK assassination, the 9/11, you name it, it's all connected. And it's all part of a massive psyops. There's a huge psychological mass mind control effect here going on. And that's what people are now slowly starting to realize. And I think that that's, just from the 40,000 foot view, the details are good. I like listening to that myself. But we also need to make sure that we connect the dots on a macro as well as a micro level.
100% on that.
Can I comment on? Actually, what he's saying is very true. And the thing is this, as I mentioned before, so here in China, Buzz Aldrin and this Russian cosmonaut came, and they said, okay, we both lied. They told China, we both lied. And now the question is this, is NASA going to come out and say we lied? Or is NASA and Russia the same time going to come out and say they lied? Now, the question is this. The excuse that NASA wants to create is the reason we faked the moon landing is because we were in a race with Cold War against the Soviet Union. But that's also a lie. That's just replacing one lie with another lie. So now they're debating, are we going to come out with this excuse or not? Or is the Soviet cosmonaut going to come clean at the same time as the Buzz Aldrin comes clean? Because if they both come clean and admit to lying, then they cannot play this card of this Cold War. That's why we faked it. They were both faking stuff, and they both knew that, and China knows that. Everybody knows that. So it's just a question of now, which card are they going to try to play next? Are they really going to try to play the Cold War card, or are they going to just come clean and say, no, we were both working together to fake this thing?
That could be why they're cooperating. I mean, we don't know what their plans are.
Well, think of the analogy of All-Star Wrestling. We all know how fake that is, and yet people, even though they know it's fake, they'll take it seriously. I mean, they take that sport very seriously. But that's a very good, very simplistic analogy to say that all-star wrestling, it's all choreographed, it's all practiced, it's all, okay, you're going to win tonight and I'm going to win tomorrow night, and that's exactly, in a very simplistic level, what I see going on a macro level, on a international level, between the Soviet Union then, Russia now, and the Americans now, Ukraine, all of it is a staged. And I when I say theater, I'm not belittling what's happening, because people are getting hurt, okay? But I'm just trying to make the point, getting back to the Apollo missions, that it is a massive psyops. It's a huge psychological effect on people. And the sooner we realize that, the better we'll climb out of this, and we can connect all the dots, and then we'll see exactly what's going on. I think we have a better picture today of what's going on.
Yeah, I want to just. Sorry, go ahead.
I just noticed this comment in the chat that I wanted to get out of the way real quick. There's some Donald Trump 1, Pirates Never Die. He says you need solids, fluids, or gas to push against to make movement forward. To make forward movement in a vacuum ain't possible. Action, reaction. This really does my head in this misconception that people seem to have. I've got a little prop here to explain how this works. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a balloon, but imagine that basically this is the same principle, right? When this balloon, when this bottle is filled up, say it's filled up with air, right? When it's sealed, the air is pushing against the inner walls. And for anyone else, this is not a sponsor by Coca-Cola or anything like that. But anyways, basically, when the balloon is sealed, or the bottle is sealed, right? We got the air pushing on the inner walls. Okay, everything is in equilibrium. Okay, now it's important to note that the pressure inside is greater than the pressure outside. Okay, now if we undo the nozzle, what happens then is the This allows the internal gas to escape, internal pressure to escape. So that means the pressure here is going to be less than the pressure over here. Okay, so with the pressure here being the more dominant, it's going to push against the inner walls of the rocket and move it in that direction. That's why a rocket moves in space.
Yes, and another good example of that is when, if you go back and you watch some of James Van Allen's old movies, where he's launching these balloons and they have rockets on them, and they go up. Yeah, raccoons. Yeah, and they go up, 50,000 feet or up there. They're basically on weather balloons, and when they get as high as they can, there's basically no atmosphere there anyways, right? And they fire them, and then the rockets finish they finish taking off. So it works exactly the same way. You don't need any atmosphere for a rocket to push off of.
Yeah, so I wanted to touch a little bit on spacesuits, going back to for some of the newer listeners and people tuning in to the moon hoax, as we like to call it around here. The spacesuits are a fascinating aspect to it that I feel don't get a lot of attention. The great David McGowan wrote a book called Wagging the Moon Doggy, which, for anyone interested, if you follow me on the podcast platforms already, just search Wagging the Moon Doggy and the audiobook pulls up. But it's an excellent, excellent book, which I listened to about a year ago for the first time, maybe 2 years ago. And to be honest with you, it first went over my head. But after having these kind of discussions, this is our 6th time together with the Apollo detectives, I feel like I'm understanding so much more. And so this week I went back and listened to David McGowan's book, and holy smokes, the things that at first went over my head are now making a lot more sense. And one of the things that he points out in regarding to the spacesuits was how these suits were supposed to be pressurized. They were supposed to be climate controlled, 1960s magical suits. And what really doesn't get talked about is how lucky these missions were that none of these microscopic meteorites ever tore any holes through their suits or damaged their vehicles. We are told that the moon is literally every square inch of the moon is battered with some kind of crater or just getting hit at all times, and that's partially due because of no atmosphere. That's what our atmosphere helps in when things come in from outer space, they just burn up and gone. Some of those things end up making it, and that would explain some moon rocks, by the way. But the moon doesn't have any such atmosphere, so anything that's hitting it is just hitting it. And so if you can imagine a tiny little pebble flying at 50,000 miles an hour, it's going to shred right through whatever it hits. And yet these astronauts seem to dodge many of these bullets. Who'd like to comment on that?
I could mention on the safety record or the success rate of the missions. If you compare the success rate of Project Apollo to other space programs, it's extraordinarily successful. I mean, there was only one major malfunction, which was Apollo 13, and even that had a happy ending. No one was lost. No one was killed, despite all these things that could go wrong, which we just mentioned one of them, or two of them, with the spacesuits. So, in a sense, they were very, very lucky. And even NASA experts will say, well, yeah, we were very lucky. Well, that's easy to say afterwards when you're looking back at it. But it's not so easy to say that beforehand when you don't know what's going to happen. And you can imagine the horror of, for example, in fact, this was even in a documentary, that, for example, that the ascent stage engine on the LEM wouldn't work. They press a button, nothing happened, and they tried to fix it and couldn't. There's no hope of rescue. They would be stuck on the moon possibly forever. And they only had enough oxygen for a few hours. NASA just said, well, we'll switch off the radio. And apparently they had like poison capsules, which they had the option of taking if they wanted. That's what I heard. They've been issued with poison capsules. What a nightmare that would be if that was on TV.
Oh, can I comment about this micrometeorite thing? in one of Elon Musk's articles, he talked about these little hexagonal shield plates, right? The entire starship is covered with these little hexagon shields. And so Musk was talking about a mechanical robotic arm that could reach out around the craft and remove one of the hexagon shield plates and put a new plate on. So this is how they're talking about dealing with micrometeorites today. Back in the Apollo days, we didn't have to deal with that, you know.
I just wanted to comment on what Ben said. Jim Lavelle, he actually disputed the claim about cyanide pills. He says if anything went wrong, you just open the door and was the plan apparently.
Yeah.
If anything goes wrong, you just open the door and out goes the air.
They'd probably be equally quick and painless, but go on.
Yeah.
Just imagine how.
Okay, guys, can I say a little something here?
Yeah.
Sure.
So
My
go ahead, Scott.
internet connection is so bad, all I hear is garbled. I can't even follow the conversation. The video is just kicking in and out. I know you can hear me properly and everything else. I've checked my internet connection. You know, it's pulling 400 megabytes, but down here on the video itself, it's in kilobytes, for Christ's sakes. I showed Robert that, what a difference it is. But I might as well not stay on because I simply can't follow the conversation. It's all garbled. Every time you start to talk, it just garbles right on through. So I'm sorry. I'm gonna sign out. You guys have a good one. Finish it off. Do a great job.
Okay.
all right,
See you
Scott.
around.
Yeah, Scott can't hear us. He's been having internet issues all day. So I did message him and asked him if he wanted to say a few words. He obviously couldn't hear us, and also he just took control, which is what he had to do because he's having those issues. So thanks, Scott. I know you'll be listening in after you get offline.
Wheezy,
yeah.
just a quick question. There's this comment here by Donald Trump, one, pirates never die. Just pull this up, please. He says, Jared does not understand physics. Where's this comment here? Jared White does not understand physics, so I do not think he ever graduated high school. Here's a question for you. Mario Piasanti, is that you? Yeah, I had that debate on Flight the Flat Earth's channel with the Flat Earther. He just wouldn't shut up. His name was Mario Piasanti. Every time you proved him wrong, his go-to response was, "Oh, you don't understand physics. You never studied physics. You don't understand physics." Oh my God! I literally suffered a migraine during that program, and he was literally bringing up the same bullshit talking points about the rockets not working in space. Is that if that's you, Mario Piasanti? You still owe me €1 million. You said you asked you said you bet €1 million. I never studied physics. Okay, I showed you my degree completion letter. Okay, therefore I wouldn't. They don't just give away degrees in astrophysics. Okay, you have to earn that. You have to spend years in university. You know, doing all the experiments, doing all the equations, doing all the stuff, the tools for the trade. Okay, if that's you, Mario Piasanti, you owe me €1 million. You bet I never studied physics. My degree proves I did.
And make
Show me
those
the money.
€1 million payable to Wheezy. I'm out here in Florida.
You know, these are the same trolls that took away my Facebook group. You know, we had 42,000 members, and then these are just the JDL, the Jewish Defense League, and they always use these fake names of Indian people. You know, they try to blame.
I think if they're trolls, we shouldn't give them too much airtime. I mean, that just gives them more fuel. So if we just ignore them and don't address them, I think is the best course of action. That's just my opinion. I did want to. So today I went for a little run. It's all good.
I just brought that up because literally I never forgot that experience. You can actually, if you look at the live stream that happened, you can literally pinpoint the moment when the migraine kicked in. I was literally rubbing at my forehead from all my skull just literally just imploded from the headache.
And then they'll never approach us in real life. I actually challenged one to a meeting, and he never turned up. He's all mouth online, but I said, "Come and meet me in real life," and he said, "Yeah, sure, I'll do that anytime, mate." He never showed up.
Yeah, and when I put in the StreamYard in the link for a lot of these guys, they won't click it. They just talk and talk and talk, and that's why I ignore them. It's not worth the time. I did want to go over a thought and maybe you guys can help me formulate and finish this thought. So I went for a little run today, early this morning, and as I'm running, one of the things you'll hear from a lot of the NASA apologists is, or I'm sorry, one of the things that I like to bring up to a NASA apologist, I'm like, okay, so we made it in 1969 with, that tech from the 1960s, which is laughable when you think about it. These machines had these dials, to measure elevation and all digital, even though cars never had that technology until fairly recently. But let's move on. But we haven't been back. Allegedly, we made it in 69 and 72 and all that good stuff. But we haven't been back. We don't have anything to get us there. We see with the Artemis program still struggling to this day. And so I was thinking, what if during the Industrial Revolution, in the late 1800s, when the telegraph lines were getting posted around the nation and they had the telegraph lines, and then all of a sudden someone comes out, oh shit, I just found the internet. I can FaceTime people. And they start FaceTiming for a couple years. And then all of a sudden, like, all right, we're gonna drop it, and we're never gonna FaceTime anyone ever again. Let's go back to the telegraph lines and slowly build it up. That's the thought that came to my mind. Any thoughts on that? It would be, that's how ridiculous the fact that we haven't returned in all these decades. It is, and that was, maybe some may say it's a false equivalence. I don't know. It's just a thought. I'd like to get your criticism.
I would go even further than that and say, I was just going to say, I would go even further than that and say that would be like getting rid of the phones and going back to carrier pigeons. That's what it's like.
It's a very good metaphor, and I've never heard anywhere else in science or technology this happening, that we advance to a certain level, then we regress. Short of like major cataclysms like the Santorini eruption, which put the Minoan civilization out, and basically Greek civilization had to restart. There's no other situation where without some major disaster, that we regress to an earlier form of technology than what we had before. Science is accumulative. People learn. There's records, there's papers, there's documents. And in this case, it's not even a long period of time. It's a couple of decades. It makes no sense at all. None.
What about the ship fueling? Now they're talking about 18, 19 tankers just to refuel the ship now.
Oh my God.
Why we didn't have to do that in the Apollo days? So the question, the answer, this is the excuse that they try to make now. They say, well, the reason we need so many tankers refueling nowadays is because our crafts are different, and we're trying to build crafts that will establish a permanent moon base. That's the excuse they make. Well, it's much more difficult now because we're trying to establish a permanent moon base. So that's why back then in the 1960s, we didn't have to refuel tanker ships, blah, blah, blah. This is just...
They're not.
Yeah.
This is not an establishment of a permanent base. Artemis is good. I know they're going to have that. There's going to be the lunar orbiter.
Yeah, to be fair, it's the lunar module. The lunar lander is literally the size of the S4 stage, the S4B stage on the Saturn V. That's how big the Starship is, and obviously you're going to need to refuel this with these gigantic things. And the reason why SpaceX say they only needed 4 tanker missions, but realistically, the propellants that they use is cryogenics, liquid propellant. Okay, and you can only keep on the pad. You can see all the gas venting down the side. That's when the liquid propellant turns back into a gas, you've got to vent it out to stop the tank from rupturing. You see, and it's the same process in space. Obviously, on the ground, you can have air conditioning units to try to keep it liquid as long as you want. But in space, you're going to have to continuously replenish this propellant to make up for the stuff that you've lost in boil off. They call it boil off. Okay, and so so in the end, you're going to need 20 or so tanker flights to do it. It's just not a viable option. And so
no, but what about micrometeorite shields? Now that space station, the Lunar Gateway Station, is going to need something better than what the ISS has. I'll tell you that. It has to, because it is out there in the vacuum of space. There's no shielding around the moon. There's no Van Allen belts. There's no atmosphere. So that thing is going to get pummeled with micrometeorites. And no amount of Whipple shielding is going to function, not the type that they have on that space station. I had to look at it. They have 2 modules completed, and they're on the 3rd one, which means they still have 2 to complete because there's 5 modules altogether. Now, that station was supposed to be up at the end of this year, 2025. That's when they said that they wanted that up there and assembled. So good luck to them.
I think this.
I was just going to say another problem too is if they're going to be, the idea is to have the Starship basically go back and forth between the gateway station for refueling. Well, how if it takes 20 tanker missions just to refuel it when it's in Earth orbit? How are you going to send 20 or so tanker missions to the lunar orbit, to refuel this thing? I mean, like each of those tanker missions that you're going to send out to the moon is going to require 20 more so missions. In fact, just to comparison's sake, I got this book here by Werner von Braun. Right, in the 1950s, he was proposing basically we build a space station, a big ring space station. We would have our moon ships docked to that, and that's where we would do all the refueling. We would ferry the moon ships back and forth between the moon and Earth orbit. And of course, one thing that he didn't know at the time, of course, was that the altitude for his station would have put it right in the middle of the Van Allen belt. And of course, it wasn't discovered back then. But that's something that's still considered today. I think one of them. What was his name? Zubrin, I think his name was. The guy who's constantly touting missions to Mars. I think he proposed just use the ISS. Just have the ISS as our station. To ferry, moon ships back and forth between the moon and Earth orbit.
So why don't they?
Obviously, they don't. They all these proposals they consider small Apollo-sized capsules, and well, that's not going to offer protection from the radiation on the way to there.
Arthur C. Clarke.
The idea that the dangerously accepted position seems to be, if it works for the ISS, it must work for the moon missions. That's
but the ISS is ISS is still protected by the Earth's atmosphere.
Exactly. Exactly. That's why I cringe whenever people think, you realize the Orion spacecraft has 20 grams per square centimeter of shielding, the exact same amount as the International Space Station. Mind blowing.
Yeah, it's not the same. It's not the ISS is not protected by Earth's atmosphere. It's protected by the Earth's magnetosphere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. Yeah, magnetosphere. Yeah.
Regarding this lunar gateway, I think that this is just my opinion, but I think that this is like a piece of candy, and that they're holding in front of people's faces. So, wow, we dream of a lunar gateway and a space station orbiting around the moon. But I think that this project was designed to be canceled from the beginning. I don't think they're ever going to. They know that that's just a pipe dream. So, I just want to tell my opinion here is like basically, as we all kind of know, is that Musk has said that the moon is the diversion, right? So I think that we know that what does NASA actually have to offer humanity anymore? So NASA, what they have is the SLS, which is the first green energy rocket, because NASA is the only company which can afford a green energy rocket. It's very difficult to contain hydrogen. Right. So it's kind of like, let's give NASA their last hooray. And their last hooray might be just Artemis 2, because if they can launch some astronauts to actually orbit the moon and come back on a green rocket, but this is just their last little hooray. Everything else is going to get canceled because there's no purpose for a lunar gateway. There's no purpose for anything else. Everything else will be done on not on hydrogen-powered rockets.
What about boron nitride nanotubes, though, Raza?
Right, that's the shielding that they're using. That's why the ship is so heavy, So it's like this. When it comes to the radiation issue, or micrometeorites for that matter, then you have. When it comes to micrometeorites, it's basically just a game of Russian roulette. You never know when you're going to get hit with anything larger than just like tiny grain of sand, So if you get hit with something larger than a grain of sand, you're finished, and there's nothing you can do about that, right? So it's just like Russian roulette. Any moment you're up there, you can get hit. So regarding this this shielding, so we have the main source. You have the boron nitride nanotubes, which is what the spacesuits and the outside hull is made of. But then you have these big bags of water, right? So that's the main shielding, is they're planning on filling up the inside of the hull with bags of water, because water is the most efficient radiation blocking material. The only problem with water is that it's extremely heavy. So regarding radiation, it's all a question of this: how much water are we going to put in those bags versus how much cancer treatment we're going to have to give the astronauts when they give back. So there's a game going on here. How much can we put into the radiation material, and how much are we confident in our radiation treatment to remove the cancer cells from their body when they get back? Because you cannot block out 100% of the radiation. It's impossible. You're just going to have to deal with the cancer that results in your body afterwards, right? So it's an exchange. How much radiation protection shielding do you have, and how much cancer treatment you're going to have to do later?
Yeah, Raz, I just wanted to comment on the amount of water that would have been needed. John H. Malden actually mentions this in his book. He says that you would need about 2 meters of water completely surrounding the capsule with the astronauts inside. There have been higher estimates. There have been Eugene Parker actually proposed something like 5 meters of shielding, 5 meters of water. Somebody asked in the chat.
Breaking news.
He's made it.
Marcus is
Better
in
late
the
than
house.
Late than never.
The legend.
He's made it.
Marcus is in the house.
That was going to be your live and let die moment for a second.
He's made it.
Marcus, I think you're playing as Marcus in the background. Marcus, I think you're playing as Marcus in the background.
Hang on, mate.
Yeah, if you can mute that video. I think you're playing as Marcus in the background.
Hang on, mate. Oh, yeah.
If you can mute that video. I think you're playing as Marcus in the background. Let me mute him real quick.
There we go.
Okay, there we go. There we go.
Sorry,
Perfect.
I was just... Hey, good to see you guys.
You too, mate. Yeah, good. Glad you're with us.
Yeah.
Well,
I thought it may have been a little too late for you, but here you are partying it with us. Even Ben is here with us, and I know you guys are 5 hours ahead of me.
I was disappointed because I've missed the last few for the last couple of months, so I thought I really want to see Marcus again.
Yeah, quite. Thanks, Ben. Always good to see you.
You too, mate.
Always good to see you too.
Yeah, and Raza. Good to see you, Raza. Yeah, got some good information.
Mr. Allen, since you joined us, and what have you got to say? What has been on your mind regarding this little moon hoax topic?
Well, I was watching Tim Dodd's, the Everyday Astronaut, his explanation as to how all these crazy conspiracy theorists, that's us, are so wrong. And I watched his 2 hours, 20 minutes of explanation, and I thought, bloody hell, he's only doing what everybody else has always done. No stars in the sky. Well, that's obvious. Who here has ever said that is a reason for understanding the hoax? Nobody. We all know why there are no stars in the sky. It's all to do with the light levels. Because, don't forget, they're all photographic film, these pictures, not digital. And then he has the waving flags and explains about that. Well, we know about that. Then he has, the shadow angles always go like that. It's all perspective. It's not rocket science. He didn't do any rocket science until he got to the end of his film, when he was so proud to demonstrate his understanding of delta V. And he come up with all the weights of the capsules and the rockets and the fuel, and how the delta V was definitely extraordinarily advanced And so he understood it, and so he could explain it. And so he could explain why Apollo was real. It took 2 hours, 20 minutes to explain why Apollo was real. The trouble is he didn't. He didn't look at the two major things, which we've discussed extensively, which he obviously has no interest in understanding. The vacuum level is space and the damage that does to human-created equipment, and the damage that radiation beyond the Van Allen belts, going through the belts is not a problem, according to Mr. Dodd, but going into space beyond the Van Allen belts, now that is a completely different thing, and he didn't explain any of that. So he's a NASA trill, whatever.
Well, you know,
I think he's butthurt.
Shill.
I think he's
Trill.
I was just going to say, I think he's butthurt in particular because he lost out on his moon mission. He was supposed to be on that Dear Moon flight, you know, that tourist mission with the Starship. That got cancelled. You know, like many other missions to the moon get cancelled.
Yep.
Obviously, Starship's not a viable option for going to the moon, anyways. It seems, and I guess he wants to try and. He's been a huge supporter of the SpaceX pipe dream and stuff. And I'll raise my hand up here and say I, for the longest time, believed in SpaceX's proposals to get to the moon and Mars, because I believed that what Musk was proposing back then, he was proposing a modern day equivalent of the Nova rocket, or a modern day equivalent of the UR700M rocket. You know, these gigantic rockets that could have easily have lifted the shelter that would have been needed to survive the radiation on a flight to the moon. What he's delivered is a modern day equivalent of the N1 rocket, which that's even being too generous because it can't even get to Earth orbit. You know, the N1 was intended to get to Earth orbit. This thing struggles just to do suborbit. So I reckon he's probably very, very, very butthurt and possibly embarrassed for having, you know, bought this lie. He was actually there watching the launch of the first mission, and he saw it blew up. Not once did he think, "Oh my God, that could have been me." You know, he was just, "Oh yeah, yeah, oh it blew up, yeah." It made them all look like lunatics, and I think he's trying to salvage himself some credibility. I say that in quotation marks because he's just rehashing the same spurious talking points by Windley and Plate and the others. And I didn't see as far as you did, but I just stopped watching after he got to the bit about the sea rock. And not once did he mention, oh, by the way, Jerry White has the earliest release of the photograph, and it clearly shows the sea on it.
Yeah. Well, Tim Dodd managed to confuse everybody by talking about the sea rock and how it was this famous little thing on the negative, which it wasn't. Obviously, he's not listened to what you had to say about it because he was trying to confuse his audience, as most people do when they try to explain why Apollo was real, because they never address the real problems.
Well, you know, Marcus, I appreciate you watching this so we don't have to. From what I gather, he didn't actually say anything original.
No, he didn't. No, he didn't say anything original. It was a very well. It was a very.
I got a question.
Film.
I got a question. Did he provide any calculations for what the radiation should have been during the trip through the Van Allen belts? Did he do any calculations at all, or did he just rehash this thing? Oh, we skimmed across it, blah, blah, blah.
No, just quoted what NASA claimed the radiation levels were, and that Apollo 14 was the one with the most level of radiation. But it certainly not that famous little chart that they produced show that the level of radiation on each of the Apollo missions was really no more than the International Space Station gets. And they expect us to believe it. Dear, oh dear.
Apollo 14 supposedly went through the heart of the belts, and you know what's coming. There's this passage here from Keller's paper about trips through the heart of the belts. They say the resulting shield thickness, this is for in the heart of the Van Allen belt, the inner belt, the resulting shield thickness are seen to be quite formidable, with approximately 100 grams per square centimeter needed to reduce the total dose rate down to 1 Roentgen per hour. Consequently, due to the very large shielding penalty involved, the most intense regions of the inner Van Allen belt will probably be a forbidden region for manned orbiting vehicles. So when people say, "Oh, well, only Apollo 14 went through the heart of the belt," and when you look at that doses that they report is just not consistent with what would have been expected.
No, exactly.
Just to put that in perspective as well, 100 grams per square centimeter of shielding, that's like a meter of water.
Yeah.
Meter of water.
Oh, no, just little bits of aluminium. That's all you need. And that's all they had. And he was, the lunar module that landed, allegedly, only had 3 layers of Reynolds wrap, kitchen foil in places. All right, that not necessarily inside the pressurized compartment, but it was a pretty flimsy craft. So the description of it as being as if it was made at a school science fair is about right.
Have you seen those close-ups on it? You can see like the rivets aren't even matching up. It literally looks like a second grader built it.
Second grader, first attempt to get onto the moon. That's about what NASA had come to.
Yeah.
And his explanation as to why we haven't been back, well, it's the standard stuff, not enough money, not interested anymore, been there, done that. Let's do something more interesting. Well, let's try going back to the moon, guys. That's the simple thing to do. And this idea that you have to have 20 or is it 30 starships to refuel the rocket before it even leaves Earth orbit is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Don't people understand about escape velocity? 25,000 miles an hour to escape Earth's gravity. Once you've escaped it, you switch the rockets off and you coast the rest of the way to the moon. You don't need fuel. You hardly need fuel to get back again.
We were discussing the Starship refueling thing just before you came on the program. You know, the huge amounts of rockets that are needed comes down to the fact that the Starship is very big and you need to fill this up. Initially, they're expecting four missions, but between missions, you got all this gas venting off. You see, it's liquid oxygen, liquid methane, it turns back into a gas after a while, and you got to vent that out to prevent the ship from rupturing. You know, so you got to send all these other missions up to replenish the propellants. And keep in mind, they're planning to keep this thing docked with the gateway between flights. So if it takes 20 missions to send to refuel the thing while it's in Earth orbit, that means every refueling mission you're going to send up to the moon, that's going to need another 20 missions each just to get their fuel up there.
It's the ultimate kind of pyramid number system, isn't it? I mean,
it is.
But you can only build a pyramid so high, and then it can't go any higher because the amount of weight beneath it the amount of weight on top would crush what's beneath it.
Yeah.
So when we're on this subject, I'm sorry, this subject, I like to sprinkle in stuff for newer folks. And on this subject, that is one of the common things you'll hear from NASA apologists when you ask them why haven't we been back? A lot of times they will say, well, why do we have to go back? We already found it all. It's just the moon. It's boring. They make up all these excuses. My answer to someone like that would be, well, if we could go back, don't you think some of these billionaires would invest on landing and mining some kind of asteroid out there? I mean, the minerals out in space are far greater than anything we have, that are limited resources out here on our planet. I mean, imagine finding an asteroid that's just 100% diamond. You know what I'm saying? You don't think some of these moguls would figure out a way to, land on the damn thing and just mine the crap out of it, and voila, you've got a lot of wealth. And so that little saying, oh yeah, there's no reason to go back. We already did it in the 60s. It's boring. Moving on. It's complete hogwash. Any thoughts on that, Mr. Marcus?
Well, there's a new NASA administrator being nominated by President Trump, which is quite unusual. It's not often that you get the president nominating the NASA administrator, and his name is Jared Isaacman, who's a billionaire in his own right. He's obviously, if you're going to be nominated by Trump, you've probably got to be a billionaire to get the nomination. Anyway, he's been nominated. He's a pilot. He's been into space on the one of the private missions quite recently.
Marathon.
Say again?
Polaris Dawn. He was on that, and I think the other one was called Inspiration 4, if I recall correctly.
That's right. Yeah. So he's been into space. He knows what it's all about, and maybe he's going to do what should have happened a long time ago and cancel Artemis, which is a complete disaster. It's what Trump recommended in his first term. Come on, NASA, go back to the moon. And he gave
Bill Nelson's gone then. Bill Nelson is out.
Yeah, well, Bill Nelson's been gone for a while. There's a lady was a temporary administrator. I forget her name, but she's obviously not going to stay there very long. So we got this Gerard Isaacman.
See, some people are saying that Jerry Eisenman was faking the Polaris Dawn. This is a nonsense, okay? You see, that this is a part of NASA's plan to come clean. Derek Eisenman knows that they have never sent a man to the moon. So it's all about getting people in place.
Yeah.
First of all, the Polaris Dawn was a private mission. NASA had nothing to do with it. It was a private mission. It was purely funded out of Jared Eisenman's pocket. It was a private mission, a tourist mission for all intents and purposes. And, people, I think that when it comes down to it, this has become a case of, the little boy who cried wolf, NASA, lies about the moon landing, and then people start having doubts, not just about NASA's missions, but all spaceflight in general. That's what's, some people might be sincerely doubtful about these things, but others are just, disinformation types. Like that guy who I debated on Fight the Flat Earth channel, as I mentioned before. He knew he was lying. He kept pushing this NASA, the rocket thrust equation from NASA's website, even though the exact website he took it from, it clearly says down the bottom that a rocket will work in space. And he was just ignoring that. Whenever he was pressed about that, he would just dodge it. It's calculating the velocity of the gases shooting out the gas. No, it's not. The velocity of the gases is literally in the equation. It's calculating the thrust.
Yeah, I know last time I voiced his opinion, and I have a way different view than probably everyone on this panel. But when I saw Elon Musk launch that Tesla into space, I didn't buy it then, and I still don't buy it. I know you guys buy it. I don't, and that's just me. And I get accused of being a flat earther for that. I don't care. I don't buy it. It looks fake as hell, just like the lunar lander. I'm just using basic reasoning. I'm not using these 10th to the 14th degree and the dimensions in here. I don't give a shit. I'm looking at the film and it looks fake as hell. And I know I'm the only one. And I know last time people criticized me and said I was dumb and all this. I don't care. That's just me looking at it, and that's how I feel about it. And I stand by it.
Wheezy, you're not the only one. I'm with you on this.
Hell yeah, Randy. Let's go.
Let me offer a bit of a counterbalance. Let me offer a bit of a counterbalance to that, because I can actually explain why it looks a bit fake, as Musk would put it. It's because of the lack of atmosphere. It makes the colors show up different, and it tends to be a bit jarring to some people. But when it comes to actual evidence that there is indeed a car up there, you can actually track where it's been. You can see it moving across this. Obviously, we don't have the resolving capabilities to actually see it as a car, but we can actually track its positions in the sky. We know where it's going to appear over the sky every now and then. There's websites, showing where it is in its orbit. And
what you're saying, though, Jared, can I push back on that respectfully?
Go ahead.
That kind of sounds like what you just mentioned, how we can track this. It's kind of like when NASA apologists talk about, oh, yeah, you can see the flags on the moon. You can see the space stations. You just got to go to the website and put these little coordinates, which is complete and utter hogwash. And so
that's a bit of a different scenario altogether. I'm talking about, that's a different scenario, because the only photos that claim to show the flags are those by the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, these NASA things, and that's a different scenario. We're basically looking at NASA's pictures here's NASA's pictures of the flag on the moon. When I'm talking about actually, looking at this thing through a telescope of your own. Obviously, no one has a telescope to see the flag on the moon, that's supposedly on the moon, but to see, objects moving across the sky, you can use a telescope for that purpose. That's no problem.
I think his point is that the Polaris Dawn tracker is not a NASA project.
That's true, yeah.
Right. So,
okay.
But I wanted to come back to Jared's point here, because Jared said that, he was talking about different trolls that try different tactics to discredit the real moon landing research. And speaking about trolls, I wanted to come back to one interesting point. So we have this one troll by the name of MC Toon, right? I think most people are familiar with him. So now this is something I wanted to tell Wheezy about. So Wheezy, when you and I did a show together, it was called The 12 Smoking Guns, right?
Raza, before you get on, I think Randy had was ready to sign off, and
I will have to leave as well, gents.
Okay.
It's been great fun. I've really enjoyed it.
It's been great.
To be back.
We're gonna plan it again, and we're all gonna get together. Yeah, this is great. I don't want you guys to keep holding on, and so.
Cool. I've been away a while, but it's great to be back. It's really great to be back with you guys.
Yeah, good to see you, Ben.
I want to get in touch with you, Ben. Maybe I can get your. If you could put your email in the private chat.
Yeah, certainly.
I'll get in touch with you that way. Awesome. And Randy, you are a boss, and it's awesome that we're gonna have to do a show soon too, my man. Thank you so much. Thank you, too, gentlemen.
You're welcome, Weezy. Thank you for having me on, and we'll connect soon. And cheers to Marcus. Marcus, I'll be in touch with you soon.
Yeah, thanks, Randy.
And Ben's good seeing you again. Haven't seen you in a while. And cheers to and cheers to everyone. Weezy, we'll chat soon.
Absolutely. Take care,
All
guys.
Right. Okay.
Talking to you.
Take care.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye.
Yes, sir.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. Yeah.
All right.
You mentioned
Dr. Raza was going to say something, and I cut him off, so I apologize.
Yeah, actually, this is a really interesting thing. So when we did our 12 Smoking Guns video, I did a point number 13 at the end, which I call the extra point. I don't know if you remember this, Wheezy, but I was talking about Apollo 12 when they flew to the moon and then they came back. When they came back, they went straight through the heart of the Allen belts, the Van Allen belts. I don't know if you remember that. I showed you the NASA charts. You remember?
I'm having a hard time recalling that, if I'm being perfectly honest.
So the main excuse which the apologists make is that we flew around the belts, right? That's how they avoided the radiation. But then I proved that on the return mission of Apollo 12, they went straight through the heart of the belts. So the whole excuse that they tried to avoid the belts is void, right? And so then MC Toon came on later and admitted I was right. So later in a debate with MC Toon, he was forced to admit that Russell was right about them not avoiding the belts on the return mission of Apollo 12. So the whole debate about them trying to avoid the Van Allen belts is thrown out the window now. That's a nonsense debate. He already admitted I was right. They didn't try to avoid the belts. They could fly right through it on Apollo 12, so why not on any of the others?
Yeah, that was one of the points that Tim Dodd, the everyday astronaut, was making. Oh, they flew round the belts, or they brushed the edge of them. That was his excuse. And he showed this wonderful picture of the Earth. And all right, the Earth is tilted 23.4 degrees off the vertical. But if you launch from the equator, which is where Apollo 11 launched from, the TLI, translunar injection, getting out of Earth orbit, going to the moon, they launched from the equator, the Earth's equator. And the moon is more or less straight ahead. So they must have gone straight through the belts. So this idea that they avoided them really just confirms that the belts are dangerous, because otherwise, why would anybody want to avoid them?
You can look at the coordinates that have been attributed to the Apollo 11 mission, and if I recall correctly, they say that the latitudes never exceeded something like 30 degrees. And I've read in a few places, I think it was Wright et al. They had a textbook, Physics of Space Security, I think it was called. They said that the belts only seem to become negligible at 60 degrees latitude north or south of the equator. Okay, well, that right there proves that this is a hoax, because if you look at the numbers that NASA is telling us, they never went anywhere close to those coordinates. They didn't go anywhere near that, so they would have been exposed to the more harmful radiation. And there's a saying in in university, right? And this applies to this everyday astronaut clown. Okay, no working, no marks. No math, no marks. That's what they say in university. You know, if you're going to be, you know, providing your report, your assignments, whatever, you have to show your workings and show the examiners how you actually arrived at that conclusion. The only person who I've ever seen do any math to try and substantiate his claim that the radiation device would have been safe was Robert Brannig, and he was doing all kinds of things to downplay the amount of radiation astronauts would have received. Like he claimed that that anything greater than 100 mega electron volts would have gone straight to the astronauts' bodies and left little energy. Well, tell that to people who work in proton therapy, where they're accelerating the protons at a tumor through this little beam of protons. Okay, those are in the range of something like 200 to 250 mega electron volts, which is much greater than what he claims would have gone straight through. So he was just, and after I proved that in my video, Radiation Reloaded, he deleted his website about the Van Allen belts. I wonder why. And you were to mention something about MC Toons recently. I never followed his stuff religiously or anything like that, but I was watching a segment of your debate with him, Marcus. You were talking about how the radiation would have been, how the film would have been damaged by the vacuum of space. He was arguing, oh well, they could have just corrected that with the color charts they had. Well, I was looking at the March to the Moon website, which claims to be, you know, photos of the original negatives, you know, and I was looking through that and I couldn't see any damage comparable to what you guys found with putting the film in the vacuum chamber. It didn't look anything like that. So if this is the original, now first of all, I doubt that this film on March to the Moon has been unaltered, because obviously they got rid of the C by now. But you know, so. And is there any record of them, you know, doctoring the original film, you know, to try to get rid of any damage induced by exposure to the vacuum? Well, no, there isn't. In fact, they claim we try to avoid using the original films as best we can. You know, we made master copies of those original negatives and just use those to, you know, for duplication purposes and stuff. And these were made under ultra clean conditions, I should add, as well. Okay, and so if the explanation as to the lack of any damage to the exposure to the vacuum of space is that, oh, they've retouched it with using the color charts as a reference and stuff. Well, why can't we see any damage on the original films, the quote original films that they're putting on this March to the Moon website?
Yeah, well, that March to the Moon website was just another attempt to make these crazy conspiracy theorists wrong. And it failed rather monumentally, because they missed out so many of the problems. Now, we've already mentioned the photographic film, which we know is damaged by a vacuum, because we've done the experiment. Robert and Scott, and to an extent myself, we were involved in the experiment to demonstrate that if you put a photographic film in a vacuum and then take photographs with it, the photographs are seriously affected, to the extent that the color balance of the film, don't forget all the Apollo photographs were color, or most of them were color, the black and white film would be fogged, i.e. the contrast would be reduced. But nobody ever talks about that. It's as if it's one of those secrets that only certain people know about. Well, we know about it. We talk about it publicly, so everybody else should know about it. And if it's a reasonable thing to query about Apollo, how did they get the photographs on the moon if the photographic film is damaged? It's a reasonable question to ask. But will anybody address it? No, they won't. They won't address it because they know that if they do, the hoax is proved. And we can demonstrate it. We know that the film is damaged. And even NASA knows that the film is damaged. They asked for people to conduct experiments before they even went, and they found the film was damaged, and they said so. But there's no evidence that they did anything about correcting that, except for this magic film, the film that we're told was especially made for space, but nobody can find it. It's as if it's as much a mystery as getting to the moon in the first place. Find the film that they claim they used. It's called XRC.
Marcus, I wanted to mention, you were talking about this March to the Moon, right? This is the webpage where the apologists claim that these are the originals. You can trust us. These are not photoshopped, right?
Yeah.
So now I found on the Internet Archives the original Apollo webpage back from 2001 when I used to look at that webpage. And so I have a folder here. I don't know if I can share screen, but we can compare the original unphotoshopped images if you want.
Okay.
Okay, so Wheezy, it said if I want to share I should share an image file or share screen. Share screen is better.
If it's a file, when you hit
If
that
it's an image.
Yeah,
I
hit
just
the
want to share
present.
what's some. I'll try this. I'll try it.
Yeah, hit the present
Windows.
button.
Okay, I
and
found
then,
it. Yeah, I found it. Mhm.
I got it here. 1 second. All right, here we are. Let me remove this comment so we can see it all. And I'm going to make the image bigger. Here we go. All right. What are we looking at? So for those audio listeners, definitely follow us on our video platform so you can see what we're talking about. And if you are listening in a podcast format, the timestamp should be around 2 minutes and 16 or 2 hours and 16 minutes. All right. What are we looking at, Dr. Raza?
So what we're looking at is two images which came from the NASA webpage, and the image on the left is what the NASA webpage used to look like back in 2001, and the image on the right is what the NASA webpage looks like today. Okay, and so if you look right, left, if I in fact I can just show you them one by one. Okay, so this is the way it used to look then, and this is the way it looks today. You can see that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's 2001. This is 2024. Okay, 25.
Yeah, it's been changed.
It's been changed. You can see how they photoshopped the color change. So here's the bright spot, and here's the dark spot, and then today, voila, it's bright here and bright here. Yes.
Yeah.
And they also fixed the color changes. So this there's so many of these. You can see this one now.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
It's great. Yeah, you can see how dark it is here on the corner, and then voila, today it's so bright. You know,
it's been bright.
And this can only be done through Photoshop, right? So here's one by one. Okay, so this is
Dr. Raza. You're missing the ta-da. you got to do that.
Okay, so this is what the NASA webpage looked like back then, and then ta-da! This is what it looks like today.
Yeah. You have the Buzz Aldrin portrait photo. I know that's a classic example of them getting rid of the fall off. I actually found
There's so many of them. So let's you mind if I breeze through a couple of these, because it just keeps going and going.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right.
That's good.
But you got to do the ta-da correctly. Come on, Dr. Raza.
Oh, look.
All right. So you can see
that background's been changed.
Yeah, here. So this is back then. Ta-da!
Ta-da!
Yeah, you can see how dark it is back then in the corners, and then ta-da!
Yeah, it shows the fall off of light.
Yeah. Also, look in the window.
Yeah.
The window of the LEM. Some of the images they forgot to fill in the window with the moon glare. So here if you pay attention how bright the window is today as well. I think there's more examples. Yeah. So you can see how dark it is in the background corner back here. So back then,
I'm reminded of Jan Lundberg's statement where he said it looks like he's standing in the spotlight.
Yeah.
And he says he can explain that. He said, you have to go and find Armstrong and ask him.
Yeah. So this is the most famous, right? The flag salute. And you look
Yeah.
how dark it is in the back corner compared to today. Yes. Oh, it's just so dark here, and then ta-da! So clean and bright. It's just incredible.
Oh, that one you got there, Raza.
Mm.
Have you seen the one-legged astronaut?
No, I haven't seen that one.
Is the footprint in the foreground of the pictures? Very distinct footprints,
Mm.
but one of them is at right angles, and there's only one. Where's the other footprints going to it and from it? It's not there. It's a one-legged astronaut. Somebody must, and that cable that we see there is just the link to the camera, to the TV camera from the lunar module.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, what they had to do was to remove the fall off of light because they're using mannequins here.
Yeah.
Yeah, small.
And the shadows are also diverging. The shadow of the ship is at an angle from the shadow of the astronaut.
Yeah, that's
right?
true. Yep. Yeah, they forgot that. Yeah, the set dressers weren't particularly good because they had to do it all in secret.
So they claim that it's because of the shape of the land, but you can see from I just want to comment on that. They say that from the shape of the land, you can tell that they weren't standing on a level field, and that's what's causing the shadows to diverge. So this is the excuse that the apologists make. However, if you look at the video, if you watch the video of the Neil Armstrong setting up the camera, so that camera was rolling. There was this camera that supposedly connected on a wire to the ship, and Neil Armstrong climbed down and he pulled the camera along with the wire, and he set up the camera. And then they were telling him, okay, turn the camera to point at the ship, right? So if you watch that video clip of Neil Armstrong pointing the camera towards the ship, it does show that they were on a level field, okay? So this whole argument about the unlevel field causing the shadow divergences, this is a wrong argument.
Yeah, it's
I
completely
think Armstrong himself even said when he was inspecting the landing site, he says, "Oh, we're on a very level place out here." That's what he said. You can check the transcripts.
It was supposed to be level because otherwise the thing would tip over.
Yeah, they tried to. I mean, this is the Sea of Tranquility, right? So they chose that's the most level part of the moon is on the seas, right?
Yeah, it is quite level. Right, there are some craters there, obviously micrometeorite impacts as well, and things will change. But because they didn't know the exact, way the moon looked when they set up these photographs to prove that they'd been there, or to try to prove they'd been there, they got some things wrong. Why don't they admit it? Why don't they come out and say, okay, we didn't know exactly what we were doing at the time, but we tried to get it as near as we could, but we got some things wrong. They don't dare admit that, because as soon as they start talking about how they got things wrong, people are going to say, well, what else have you got wrong? And then all Trump has to do is to set Elon Musk onto NASA with his Doge Musk rats.
They already did.
The famous computer guys who can look into these things. Maybe they'll find a few more things they got wrong.
Well, I have to say that I think if he does send, he's already talking about sticking Doge onto NASA, but realistically, I think all that's going to come out of this is that the SLS program will be cancelled, and in its place will be any SpaceX contracts with the Starship, which basically replace one pipe dream with another pipe dream, essentially. In fact, one of the we were actually talking about. I think it was Dr. Raza, you mentioned if that Artemis 1 should be their swan song or whatever it was, but actually one astronaut, I forget his name, he was actually going on record saying that this will be a suicide mission, not because of the radiation, because of the heat shield problem.
Yeah,
They don't want to talk about they don't want to talk about the radiation, but they just talk about the heat shield, how chunks it was coming off on Artemis 1.
Yeah,
and how they can just go ahead without testing a new heat shield. This is
At the very least, you would think at the very least they would have made Artemis 2, unmanned. See if this heat shield works better the second time around.
Well, that would be the only safe way to do it. So
that's what they did on Mercury. That's what they did on Mercury when they had Ham the chimp go up into space. The rocket accelerated too fast, and the chimp nearly died. So they think, okay, we'll have another. Alan Shepard was supposed to be on the next flight, but they said no. We'll have another flight next, another unmanned flight next, and see if that one does the trick. And obviously,
but that's the point. Is if you start talking about, well, we need Artemis 2.2 because we need to try out a new heat shield, then people start asking the question, well, why did the Apollo missions go so successfully every time? So
yeah, because they never went anywhere. That's why they were successful.
Well, they went to low Earth orbit, and they had already mastered that with the Gemini missions. So it's like, they did, as long as they didn't risk actually leaving low Earth orbit, then there's no need to test it. They would just go ahead and shoot it.
Exactly. Yeah.
I had a real somewhat interesting tweet the other day that I put out. My Twitter has been shadow banned for many years, but for whatever reason, the last couple of weeks, some of these tweets have taken off and got several thousands of views and action. But in one of those tweets that I made was, so we saw that Doge is investigating this department and that department and that. And I go, I wonder when Doge is going to investigate NASA. It was something along the lines of NASA has been receiving tens and tens of billions over the last few decades, and we still can't remember how to get back to the moon. And that was the gist of the tweet. and this is my opinion. My opinion is that will never happen, because if they investigate NASA, they're gonna show that the whole moon landings were all a scam, and the whole budget for NASA was used for black budgets. I would argue that a lot of people, and this goes again for some of the newer listeners, why would they fake the moon landings? In my opinion, it's because if we go back to the turbulent decade of the 1960s, there were many questionable assassinations, not only JFK, Malcolm X, RFK, Martin Luther the King, Fred Hampton, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
You also had Vietnam. And coincidentally, what a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of these launches took off, and they coincided when terrible news was coming out of Vietnam. And so that worked as a perfect cover. So all this terrible stuff is happening in Vietnam. But wait, guys, they were just going down the moon, and look at the lunar rover. Look how cool this is. Perfect distraction.
Okay, can I share this? Can I share this screen?
Yeah, I got it here. 1 second. Okay. There we go.
Yeah. You can see it?
Yep. It's on the screen.
So this is the Doge webpage where they started to do an investigation into NASA, and they found that NASA had an annual subscription of $500,000 to this left-wing political subscription. So this was they already discovered some, but then they haven't done much more searching since then. They were promising to dig deep into NASA, and so far they've only found one thing: some money laundering there into this Politico magazine. But it's if they start digging deeper, who knows what else they might find.
I think they're
doubt
going to
it.
find a lot. Yeah.
I don't think they're going to go there because it would undermine Elon Musk's little plans to go to Mars. So,
Well, but that's
it's just a conflict of
if I may
interest.
say something in something of a counterbalance here to all this. I'm not sure if you guys, from what I'm getting from you guys, you seem to be in support of what Doge is doing. I have to say that I am very distressed by some of the things that Doge has been doing in other areas. You know, they seem to be basically vetting the government of you know, healthcare, of safety, of everything else and stuff. It's just literally it's heading for disaster. What's going on right now, and by and large, what they're really vetting is any organization that was not considered loyal enough, so we say, to Donald Trump. In fact,
And we're
actually
kind of veering into the political realm, and I kind of want to stay away just for YouTube purposes.
Yeah, fair enough. I just felt I
don't want
needed
to ding the channel. Yeah,
that's understandable.
No.
I felt the need to say I'm very concerned by where the direction Doge has been going in most other areas.
Yeah, no problem. And I think you're on one end of the spectrum. Dr. Raza and Marcus are on the other end, and I'm in the middle where I think it's all nonsense. That's my stand, and that's all I just don't want to hurt the Apollo Detectives YouTube channel going too much into that, out of respect for them. If we can, let's see, we have gotten a few other comments. Let's see. Okay, Apollo Sausage says NASA has had over 1.2 trillion since 1972. Let's see. They will never admit the truth because it damages America. Oh, it's another political. Sorry, I should have read that beforehand. I want to stay away from all the presidential.
I would like to comment on the first thing they said, though, about all the budget. They keep talking about how we don't have enough money to go back to the moon all these years. Well, look at all the money they spent on the shuttle program. Look at all the money they spent on the International Space Station. It greatly outweighs the cost of the Apollo program. And then they say, oh, we destroyed the technology. That's sort of a half-truth, because throughout the 90s and the 80s and whatnot, there was all these proposals to use existing technology to go back to the moon. Like the one that stands out in my mind was the early Lunar Access program, which was the idea was we would take an Apollo-style capsule, put landing legs on that, put that in the shuttle cargo bay, launch it with the shuttle, and then either an Ariane 5 or a Titan rocket would basically launch up a Centaur rocket, which would dock with the lander that's deployed by the shuttle, fire that engine, and then send that off out to the moon. All right, then you land on the moon that way, and then make the return to Earth in that capsule. Okay, that was one of the proposals there. Obviously, it was proposed they would have that done by the year 2000. That never took place. There was other ideas using Soyuz rockets, for example. In fact, the Zond program was literally just a stripped down Soyuz capsule. The Soyuz has the service module, the reentry module, and the orbital module, which has more space in it. The Zond was essentially just a Soyuz with the orbital module removed. That was launched by a Proton rocket. The Proton rocket is still in service. The Soyuz is still in service. What's stopping them from, making another Zond flight? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, because it would show that Russia was equally competent as NASA. I mean, those Russian achievements in the early part of the space program were all organized by probably the greatest rocket scientist around, Sergei Korolev, who died rather regrettably in 1966. And really, the Soviet Union at the time really couldn't catch up with America. America making these outlandish statements. We're going to land a man on the moon, they said. Well, if Russia were going to blow the whistle on them, as everybody keeps saying they would have done if they'd known, they don't. Anybody who says that really doesn't understand how politics works. Not at that level. Of course, Russia were never going to blow the whistle. They're going to say, yeah, you did it, guys. Well done. Just the same way that America said, oh, you orbited Yuri Gagarin. Well done. They're congratulating each other because they need each other. I think Reza has shown it very well how these things work. It works.
Yeah, especially. In fact, I wanted to come back to this Roscosmos director who
Dmitry
supposedly,
Rogozin.
yeah, so he's supposedly, if you listen to his interview, he's also speaking in a very strange way where he never says it was a hoax. He doesn't even say, he just says, I haven't found the documented evidence I was looking for,
Yeah.
And now the thing is this, in my opinion, when he delivered this message, he did so as a controlled opposition puppet, because this guy, he mixed his message with other anti-Ukrainian messages. So this means that he can be used as a pawn in order to be used as those evil Russians. Okay. That was why I think he was told to say what he was said, because he was the perfect person to say such a thing. So I think that he's being used as a political pawn right now.
Well, I think the timing of his statements is telling as well, and not just his statements. There was also that that viral video of Vladimir Putin being shown the AI analysis thing, where they put pictures from the Apollo missions, pictures from their missions, pictures from the Chinese missions. They reckon, oh, the AI detects fakery in the Apollo missions, but none in the Russian or the Chinese missions. And Putin's like, very interesting, very interesting. But what I was going to say was that the timing of these releases is interesting because it happened after the Ukraine war, where obviously now the US it was during Biden's administration where he took a stand against the Ukrainian war, and I think the timing of these statements is telling because obviously, oh well, you're not going to you oppose our invasion of Ukraine. Well, fuck you then. Here's what we know about the moon hoax.
We're on YouTube. Let's tone it down. No, it's yeah, good stuff. We've got 150 people combined. My platforms with the awesome Apollo detectives on YouTube, and that's the thing. I'm just trying to be cognizant of their channel. I mean, they've been taken down and they're trying to build up, and we don't want them taken down again. So I'm just trying to be careful on that aspect. I did want to bring up, since we're on the topic of the Russians, and I brought up David McGowan's book earlier, but one of the things he points out is how advanced the Russians were. They were kicking our behind every step of the way in the space race. They were the first ones to do this, the first ones to do that, the first ones. And then out of nowhere, the Americans come up on top. It's almost like the tortoise and the hare in many ways, the analogy.
It's like a Super Bowl, right?
Yeah, the Russians are the hare just busting booty. And then for whatever reason, they just, like 2 inches before the finish line, they just take a nap. We're gonna chill here.
It's just like it's like a WWE event, where the fake wrestling, where one guy seems to be the underdog, he's losing, and then all of a sudden he pulls the body slam at the end,
Yeah.
So this whole thing was scripted because the Russians, every single piece of technology which the Russians had was a piece of technology which was given to them by America. The whole idea that the Russians were ahead at any point in the game is total nonsense. They were completely dependent on America for everything. All of the gyroscopes inside of the rockets, they couldn't have even had one guided missile at all had it not been for American technology. So the theory that Russia was somehow winning and then all of a sudden America pulled off the big win at the end is total nonsense from beginning to end, because that ties into the whole Cold War hoax. They were just a puppet show the whole time. Ever since 1917, the central bank of Russia was the same central bank of America.
Yeah.
So
and it's still and they're still not sure that the gold is in Fort Knox, are they? Perhaps Musk will go in and find out.
I want to. Can I mention something about this gold at Fort Knox? I'm trying not to get political here, but the thing is that in 2008, sorry, 2009, end of 2008, beginning of 2009, that there was a Chinese gold scandal. Okay. So what happened was this. I hope you don't mind, but it's a really important story I have to share. Most people never even heard about this 2009 Chinese gold scandal. But what happened was, in the year 2009, China had been buying these gold bars from America. And then what happened was, so ever since 2001, China was forced to join the WTO. And ever since 2001, China had been buying these gold bars. And then in 2009, China cut open the gold bars and found that the middle of the bars was a fake gold. Okay. So a lot of people never heard about this, but China found out about the gold scandal back in 2009. So if they ever do go into Fort Knox and then they cut open the bars of gold, they'll find that the insides of them. It's fine if you just scrape off the outside and you test it. Is this pure or not? Yeah, on the outside it looks pure, but if you actually cut the bars open, Fort Knox is full of fake gold.
Maybe this book can explain where all the gold in Fort Knox went.
Yeah.
Which book is that?
Really?
Which book is that?
I'm joking, mate. It's
James Bond.
A vintage edition of Goldfinger by Ian Fleming. All seriousness, though, when they actually do get around to landing sample return missions on the moon's south pole and the north pole, I think they'll be interested in what they find there, because the data from the L-Cross impact detected that that the lunar surface is at least at the poles anyway, is about 0.6% by weight gold. So,
yeah, I mean, that's the point. Is if here in China, our plans now are just to send little robots there to go mine up the rare earth minerals, right? So regarding sending a human being to the moon, there's no point at all. Maybe the only point would be just to stand there for a few minutes, take a selfie, and come back. Because the longer you stand on the surface, the more of the cells inside of your body are going to hit with radiation, and you're going to come back with cancer, Yeah. So the whole point of trying to send a human there just to take a selfie is just a waste of time and money. There's no point at all in trying to send manned missions to the moon. Just like maybe, a sense of national pride. That's why, like, here in China, they said that if NASA can actually send a man to the moon, then we'll copy that and we'll send their one, just to stand on there and take a selfie. But other than that, there's no point at all for sending an actual human to the moon. It's just about sending robots there to mine for precious minerals and stuff.
Yeah.
You'd have to do strip mining on a vast scale to get decent amounts of gold back anyways, if you're going to do that. As I said, it's about 0.6% by weight. So like for every 1,000 kilos of rock you only get about 6 kilos of gold back.
Didn't they already find one meteor which is already covered with gold?
Oh, I remember hearing something about some of that.
Yeah.
Details.
Yeah, I think I heard something. That's why I brought up the whole like diamond encrusted meteor.
Yeah, I mean, it's just as easy. Yeah. It's almost just as easy to mine a meteor as it is to mine the moon. It's not that much of a difference,
Yeah. Well, the meteorite asteroid mining would actually be somewhat easier because you can literally reach escape velocity just by running on those places.
Yeah, it's just a matter of waiting for it to come and meet your orbit, So it's not much difference. So the whole idea of sending men to the moon is just a waste of time, and even sending men to Mars is also just, again, it's maybe you can say it's like a national pride thing, if we can actually do it, if we can actually send the men to Mars. That's why, recently Musk said that the moon is just a distraction. We should just go straight to Mars because
we're going to terraform it, and we're going to make Mars great again. Yeah. Whatever.
I have to say, as a geologist, I am opposed to terraforming any celestial body because, like, let me put it this way, right? Only in some remote parts of the world you can still get Earth rocks that date back to the beginning of the Earth. And that's because the Earth's surface is constantly being recycled by tectonic plates and earthquakes for all these things. And you got the air, which oxidizes the rocks, erodes everything. Okay, whereas on places like the Moon, on Mars, and all these atmosphereless worlds and stuff, you basically, well, Mars has an atmosphere, but there's less of it there. But the point is, you can get all these ancient rocks happily there. All these rocks that date back to the early phases of the solar system. If you're going to terraform the place, you erase all the geological evidence. It's literally the equivalent of going into a science lab and smashing up all the samples they have.
Well, but let me just say that terraforming a planet is just kind of a nonsense theory anyway, because the thing is, Mars has neither an atmosphere nor do they have a magnetosphere. Okay, so the point is this: if you were going to terraform a planet, that would help increase the atmosphere, but it would not help create a magnetosphere. So the question is this: if they wanted to create a magnetosphere, how could they do that? And if you look at what some people have theorized, they say that if you drill down into the core of Mars and you light off a bunch of nuclear explosions, maybe you can get the core rotating and that will create a magnetic field. This is just fairy tale stuff.
Somebody's been watching The Core too many times. That was I never forget this. When I was in my geology course, somebody actually flashed the professor actually flashed a poster of the Core in one of his lecture slides, the movie The Core, and he says, most scientifically inaccurate film ever. And towards the end of my degree, I actually cited what was it, the new Godzilla versus King Kong film where they had the Hollow Earth thing, and the guy says, maybe I should update my slides. The Hollow Earth thing and Godzilla versus that ruined the Godzilla films for me.
Yeah.
Right. So, but the point is, I'm trying to say is this: like terraforming Mars is like a fairy tale story. So I think that the reason why they're trying to do that is because it's a matter of national pride. Trying to get national pride up. Okay, this time we're going to Mars. Blah blah blah. But so it's the same as the Lunar Gateway. It's like, oh, we're going to build a space station around the moon. This is just the fairy tale talk. So the thing is that eventually all these dreams are going to come shattering down, because it's like the only thing really that's practical is just, mining the moon for precious minerals or mining asteroids for precious minerals, and, sending men to the moon or even sending men to the Mars, it serves no purpose at all. The only reason to send them there is to just be as guinea pigs so that we can test our cancer treatment cures for their bodies by the time they get back.
Yeah.
Just one quick thing. I've been doing this quite a lot throughout the show. If you see me rubbing up my eyes like this, it's the light. It's early in the day for me, and I got the light shining into my eyes. I just wanted to, if anybody's wondering about that, just so everybody's clear.
Well, we'll probably be wrapping things up here very shortly. We did 3 hours, and I know it's super late for Mr. Marcus Allen. It's 8, let's see, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's 1 o'clock in the morning.
It's approaching 1 o'clock over here.
Yeah.
Oh, also, don't forget, not only terraforming Mars and all that nonsense, we're going to find water on the moon. Isn't that wonderful? Water on the moon. And we can make it into rocket fuel to get back again. How are they going to get this water? I mean, the moon is in a vacuum. It's hot and it's cold. It's been there for quite a long time. There's no water on the moon. There's maybe oxygen. There's maybe hydrogen. You've got to add those two together.
I think they're talking about ice, though. They're talking about ice down.
Yeah, the only place where you can get water in plentiful quantities is in the poles. In the poles, you can happily get permanently shadowed craters where comet water will accumulate. Everywhere else on the moon, it will just be lost to space in the sunlit temperatures.
Yeah, of course it would. There's no water.
But converting water to fuel is a complete waste of time and energy, because you would have to set up so many solar panels to get enough energy to convert water into rocket fuel. So what's the point?
I would like to add something else to this nonsense about the terraforming thing. Like, one of the things you mentioned, how there's no magneto field with Mars. One of the proposals I've seen, this also applies to theories about terraforming Venus, if you can imagine, is to put these gigantic shields, these gigantic visors or whatever, in front of the actual planet itself, basically in the Lagrange point ahead of it and stuff, so to block out the radiation or the heat. How big do you think such a shield would have to be? That's just crazy talk.
Yeah, there's so much crazy talk. So, I mean, it takes a scientist. Thanks, Wheezy. Glad you got it.
Thank you. So I'm showing my gifts from the legendary Marcus Allen. Look at that.
There we go.
We are twins.
Basically, if you're not reading Nexus, you're not keeping up to date. Oh, look, you've got the book as well.
And I got my book. And check this out.
Yeah.
Personally autographed by the one and only Mr. Marcus Allen. Thank you so much for that, sir. I'm so glad you made it tonight, because I did want to thank you, live, if you will. Not just a little email. I truly cherish this. And once I finish reading that book, I want to be able to schedule an appointment with you, and we will dissect it.
We will.
Always. And there's a gentleman in the live chat. He goes by D2. D2. He's one of my members, and it's been a little running joke amongst us that, like, don't make Mr. Marcus mad. He's here. He's gonna hit you. So if you see him making comments, it's just a running little joke. It's nothing serious. We're just having a little banter.
That's the way it should be.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And just before I forget, I'd like to say hello to everybody listening, everybody watching. It's good to have you here. So spread the word. Tell people nobody has landed on the moon. And if they deny that, they say, well, I watched it on television. If you're old enough, like me, I watched it on television. Ask them how they got back. Or tell them to come and have a word with me, because that would be the best way. Or Jara, or Raza. We can put them right. We know most of what's going on. I mean, Raza's been doing this for 25 years now. I've been doing it for the best part of 30 years. You can tell I'm just so obviously looking for something interesting to get my teeth into, and that was it. Because it's a big subject, this. Jara's big. How many films have you uploaded, Jara, on Moon?
Oh man, it's well over 100 films. I forget the exact number off the top of my head, but I've produced well over 100 Moonfakers. I produced the Gem trilogy, obviously, and I produced some little side projects here and there and the like. And I honestly lost count of how many Moonfakers I produced. The last Moonfaker I produced was in 2020, which was about it was called the upstaging of the Artemis pipe dream, which was about the Chinese sample return mission, basically beating NASA to the punch with the sample return mission, bringing rocks back from the moon. And it was basically intended to highlight the broken promises. Ralph Rene was approached by NASA about giving free ideas for back then. I believe it was called the Space Exploration Initiative. Basically, the proposals to put men on the moon and Mars. By George Bush Sr., and he was included in their publication as a consultant. And by that stage, he had doubts about the moon missions. And obviously, when I first started to get involved in the moon landing hoax and stuff, there was all those talks about Bush Jr., the son, was basically making many of the same claims about we'll put men on the moon by 2020. That last Moonfaker I put out was basically like a closure to that. It goes 2020, still no manned missions on the moon.
No missions on the moon. Certainly recommend moonfaker.com for some very good and amusing films. Jara's a great actor. Well, he's a good voiceover actor as well. No, he does.
I actually have done acting. In fact, let me put this in the chat. Let me just, where is it? Hang on.
I want to give a thanks also to Robert Williams, because he has, done so much, and especially if I want to talk about a couple shows recently. We did a couple series, which is called the Cold War Hoax, and now we just finished part 1 and part 2. And then also as a background to that, Robert helped me do a show called The Bankers. And this is, I feel, really important for people to know, because to understand that the private central bank of America bought out the private central bank of the Soviet Union in 1917. This is a very key understanding to understand why the moon landings were faked, because this whole Soviet versus America thing was simply a puppet show. It's really important to understand that. So I want to thank Robert for helping produce those really great videos on the bankers and the Cold War hoax.
Yeah, they are. And it's also necessary to understand that the Federal Bank, the Federal Reserve Bank of America, is a private company. It's not a federal department.
And there's no reserves.
Yeah.
It's
No
not federal
reserves.
and there's no reserves.
It's
Yeah, I
not
had
federal,
Tony.
no reserves, and it's not a bank. I mean, that's 1913 that all started. The creature from Jekyll Island.
Jekyll Island, yeah.
Well, actually, it started.
Edward Griffin.
Actually, it started in 1694, thanks to England.
Yeah, Bank of England.
The
Bank of England just transferred to America in 1913. Same bankers then.
Yeah,
I would
I
like
did a
to thank
show on
Robert
that.
as well for the. I would like to thank Robert as well for the last 3 shows we did, where we discussed my latest Ollis article about the Polaris Dawn radiation. Cross comparing it with that of Apollo and Gemini, and we also discussed the Challenger disaster. I thought that was a really good, productive program, and I wanted to thank Robert for putting that together.
Yeah, that
was fun. Yeah, it was fun. Yeah,
that film Radiation Reloaded. That's probably the best example of deconstructing the whole Apollo program, because radiation is a major problem in space, and you've managed to show very clearly that humans can't survive it.
Okay, we're sharing my actor. You mentioned I'm a good actor as well. Here's my appearance on Fat Pizza.
Fat Pizza? What's Fat Pizza?
It's a TV show in Australia.
All right, okay.
Paulie Falzoni, you've got to listen to me. Look at this. 2 minutes after being on the news, all the crazies recognised me. What was this guy on about?
He tried to write a secret message in his own feces on the embassy walls. He faked the moon landings. He knows about it. Man, no, seriously, you got to listen to me. They're going to get you too.
Whoa, that's Oscar-level stuff, Garrett. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Where's the other? Where's the other one? Where's the other one where you're in that doing that comedy?
Oh, okay. You want to do that one too? All right, then we'll do that.
I can't believe you managed to slip in the part about he faked the moon landings.
I actually wasn't even given a script, Paulie. He just basically told me, I want you to play this crazy conspiracy theorist who basically warns me about Julian Assange. He's been taken, he's been replaced by a doppelganger. And so I basically, at the time, Assange was accused of smearing his feces on the walls of the embassy. And so I ended up working that into all that was improv. Okay, I ended up working that into my thing. And we did 5 or 6 takes, and that ended up being the one he used. He actually used an outtake. I actually slurred my lines. I meant to say, he knows they faked the moon landings. I ended up saying he faked the moon landings, implying that Assange faked them. It was hilarious and stuff. Yeah. But, okay, I got to get
going. I have to get going. It's my daytime here.
All right, then.
We're gonna wrap things up here.
Okay. Well, I just shared the other one that Robert asked about. If you wanted to share that, I appeared about 3 minutes in it. We did can we play that, Wheezy?
Yeah, let me see what timestamp you said. 3 minutes in, because it's a long video.
3 minutes in, yeah. We did basically a piss take, as Paul said, a piss take of the Jeffrey Epstein Island.
All right.
Let's see here.
I presume nobody's yet understood exactly what Jeffrey Epstein was about.
You got the
In
link?
very simple terms,
Hopefully.
it's called blackmail.
Okay, maybe put it back a few seconds before. A few
To all the vaccine. And we have all the
Right here?
microchips hidden inside the vaccine, ready to ship to all your countries. Yes, gentlemen, yes, here's to our new world order!
In this room, they had mad-long discussions about taking over the world. And I wasn't allowed to serve cocktails at these meetings because they had their own drink. I recognised the smell, and I was shocked. They was drinking blood. After the big meetings, they went down to level 3, and they had orgies with the young chicks. And when they took their masks off, that's when I seen it. They were politicians and celebrities. That's when I realised I was in the world headquarters of the Illuminati.
Now, if you don't believe me, look at this, mate. I took a
What timestamp did you say, Jera?
That was. I appear again in just a few moments. Just actually appear in the next scene if you just keep
couple of
playing.
videos of some of the many orgies. Where's my orgy folder? There. See?
What the wiki?
There was one night when I was cleaning up the orgy room.
The leader's just collapsed. Chico, quick! We need your help to move him.
I'd never seen their leader before, and I couldn't believe it. It was a reptilian.
What's happening? Chico!
Move her back. I know exactly what to do. Shush, be quiet. Be quiet.
Was it the right thing to do to help that lizard? I don't know. But lucky for that reptilian, I knew exactly what to do. See, my stooge cousin Lino, he had lizard pets for years. Sometimes they go into shock and can die.
What you do is you get your fingers and you give the belly a little tickle like that because you have to soothe the lizard, and then the lizard, it comes back to life.
So the prince said, because I'd done that, I got 2 favours off the Illuminati. 2 mad favours. Indubitably.
Jump ahead a little
The
bit,
catch
Joe.
was,
The
they
next
couldn't
scene
have
after
any
this
cash, because most of them, they're rich bankers, and they're tight
Okay, about
asses,
here.
man.
About here.
Good lad.
Apologise, man.
Is there any chance you could help me out of here? I mean, you do have that second favour.
For you? Mate, there's no chance. What, you put all their secrets on the internet, you think they're going to forget that? Mate, when your name come up, that lizard, he got the shits.
Julian Passage, damn fool, whistleblower!
Anyway, I'm taking off. It's been a nice visit.
that's
You
about
may
it.
as well have the rest.
Oh, you were this guy right here, huh? That guy.
Yeah,
right
there's
there?
me there. There's actually a bit of a
Ah.
funny story about that. You can exit out of the picture now. There's a funny story about that because we did several takes. The guy who plays the prince, he was basically he had his line, and the guy playing Epstein had his line. What happened? I was right next to him, right? You see, and Paul he says, okay, everybody act angry. You're angry about Julian Assange releasing all your secrets. I guess cut, Jara, mime it. Sorry, I'm like yeah. Here's the next take. You can see me shaking my hand, like my fist, like this, right? Because we're so compact together, right? I'm shaking it like this, and I'm meant to do this. My elbow hit the guy's drink. We had glasses of orange juice as blood. Hit the guy's drink all over the table. Take 3. Okay, keep your arm closer to yourself. Don't do anything. Right? Mime it. I let the guy do his line. Guy playing Epstein has his line. He forgot his line. In the end, they ended up using the take that I had wrecked with the drink. I was pleased I was able to salvage that.
Yeah.
You know, I hate to kind of take this down to a somber note, but I do want to mention that I have an upcoming interview. I have an upcoming interview with the guy who was a survivor of a Illuminati blood child torture ritual. So I know it's kind of maybe seems like a fun thing. You talk about lizards controlling the earth, but actually it's not a joke. There is children being taken and used in these rituals. And I have an actually upcoming interview with the person who was taken when he was a child who survived one of these things. So yeah, let's not be too lighthearted about what's actually really going on this planet.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, some people make jokes of it and completely dismiss it, and there's a lot of dark stuff going on for sure. All right, well, that was a blast, and I can't wait till we do it again. And I put links there for the Apollo Detectives YouTube channel as well as the Alice channel. Oh, I forgot to mention, we are trying to help the Apollo Detectives build their Rumble channel. So if you're on YouTube, if you are on my Rumble channel, follow the Apollo Detectives Rumble channel. Let's try to build it up so that they can grow. Should anything happen on the YouTube side, you know, they have another channel where they can continue to grow that as well. So, and I do have links to their Rumble channel if you are following me in the description. So definitely check that out. And then you can also, Jera, you are on YouTube as well. And do you have a website?
Well, I've got several websites actually. I've got my YouTube account, which is White Jera, my surname, then my first name. There's a whole story about that, but we're out of time. And I got my moonfaggot.com website, as Marcus Allen said. And I've got a new website up that's jerawhite.com, which is about my upcoming book, Trojan Smirch, which is an alternate history thriller about the January 6th insurrection, starring my fictional super spy protagonist, Sid Tanner. And we're actually, the editing is nearly done. The publisher and I were up to we've only got 4 chapters left to edit, and hopefully after that we should be ready to release it. And so it'll be out soon enough, and I'm really excited about that, and we'll see how this goes. Oh, and one last thing about my acting. Hey, Amazon, if you're watching, I'd like to throw my hat in the ring as a contender to replace Daniel Craig as James Bond.
There you go. And Dr. Raza, where do you want people to find you?
Yeah, I don't have a webpage yet. I'm working on a book, and when my book is done, then I'll announce the name of my webpage.
We'll do it on my show, Dr. Raza. Hell yeah. For sure. Beautiful. And the great Mr. Marcus Allen. He is the UK publisher of Nexus Magazine. You can find Nexus Magazine online.
There we go.
And get you a subscription.
Look at that.
Yeah,
Australian magazine it is.
Absolutely.
Nexusmagazine.com. You can contact
me. Go ahead, sorry.
No, just say you can contact me through nexusmagazine.com or through the Aulis, AULIS.com website. Just go to the contact button and I'll get the emails. So I look forward to hearing from you. Everybody who can prove that NASA really did land man on the moon. I'd love to hear from somebody who can prove it. In 30 years, I've yet to have that pleasure, but I'm looking forward to it because it may well happen anytime soon. Maybe Mr. Trump or President Trump will be able to tell us soon. Did man land man on the moon?
Come on.
Yeah,
put him up.
Let's hear it. Come on. There we go. Jared's got the book.
Yeah, this is NASA Moon America. I forgot to give fortunately there's reflections in the screen. Okay, I forgot to give a shout out to this book here. This is NASA Moon America by Ralph Renee. Okay, you can get that from the website ralphrenee.com. Now, I do stress this out. The version of this book that's published on Amazon is an illegal pirated copy. Some guy found a outdated copy of the book and published it to Amazon and Create Space or whatever it's called, and basically, yeah, didn't get my permission in writing to do that. I acquired the copyrights to Ralph Renee's book after he died, and I keep it in print through his website ralphrenee.com.
Excellent book too.
Beautiful. Excellent stuff. And for anyone, I mean, obviously, if you're following me, you are at the right place. But if you are listening to me on the Apollo Detectives channel and you'd like to follow some of my content, I do go deep. I may not be everyone's cup of tea. I try to watch my manners when I'm on the Apollo Detectives, and I cover some very heavy topics. I did have James Corbett on my show 2 weeks ago. James Corbett is a legend, and it was a great conversation. And so if anyone's interested, just search What is Truth Podcast by Wheezy on your favorite podcast player, or Rockfin, Rumble, and Odyssey. Thank you, gentlemen. It was a treat. We will definitely have to get together again. And always a great time. Robert, I don't know if he's by the phone or right there. He may just be.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah,
Robert,
of course, right here.
I did tell people to follow you guys on Rumble, as you guys have started a new channel, and hopefully that we can build that up as well. But any final words, Rob?
Well, it's we have another one over on BitChute as well called Lunar Lander Discussions. And usually we get, well, it's strange, a very strange platform, because the last video that I put out, we had 3,200 views in 5 days. There was another one with 4,600 views in 6 days. And then we have other ones where you get maybe 500 in 3 days. So it's a very strange platform since they put the monetization onto it. But the nice thing about it is that you do get more views than YouTube, because it's not so shadow banned. And the impressions that go out are the problem. They don't show your thumbnails to the public, and that's why we don't get many views. And that's just the way YouTube works. And BitChute, they're kind of wishy-washy, but we'll see. We'll see what happens with Rumble now that everything's tagged. So we'll see.
Yeah. I gave you some secret sauce tips earlier in the week, and hopefully we can get that together. Beautiful. Thank you so much, gentlemen, and we will stay in touch. Thank you, everyone that came out tonight. We had just about 150 continuously throughout, combined with all our platforms, and I'm sure we're gonna have a few thousand as the week progresses. And it's always awesome to have you guys tune in and bring in your questions, and we try to address as many as we can. And until next time, thanks everyone.